Picture a secret so vast, so ancient, that it has supposedly guided the very course of human civilization for more than 2,000 years. Imagine a council of 9 anonymous masters, each the guardian of a single, potent book containing knowledge so advanced, so dangerous, that its release could either elevate humanity to new heights or plunge it into utter chaos. This is not the plot of a fantasy novel, but the core of a legend that has persisted across centuries, the legend of the secret society of the 9 Unknown Men. It's a tale that begins in the swirling dust of a battlefield in ancient India, around 265 years before the Common Era, with a powerful emperor named Asoka. Horrified by the carnage of a recent conquest, he is said to have founded this clandestine order with one sacred duty: to safeguard the most powerful secrets of science and nature, preventing their misuse, and to subtly steer human progress away from self-destruction. From that moment forward, these 9 figures allegedly vanished into the shadows of history, their identities and work completely concealed, their influence felt but never seen. What if some of history's greatest leaps forward, from architectural marvels to medical miracles, weren't just happy accidents or isolated genius, but were nudged along by this hidden hand? The claims surrounding this society are nothing short of breathtaking. It's whispered they possess the secrets of propaganda and psychological warfare, allowing them to shape public opinion and topple empires. They are linked to alchemy and microbiology, holding cures for any disease and the formula for an elixir of life. Some even suggest their knowledge extends to communication with extraterrestrial beings and the true nature of gravity. For centuries, this story has been dismissed as pure myth, a fascinating fable for those who love a good conspiracy. Yet a closer look reveals a disturbing and compelling pattern. Why do certain revolutionary ideas appear simultaneously across the globe, as if planted by an unseen gardener? How do technologies emerge that seem to leapfrog the understanding of their time? This journey we are about to take together is an exploration of that very mystery. We are going to sift through the sands of time, separating the tantalizing threads of historical possibility from the wild speculation. We will examine the origins of this legend with Emperor Asoka, delve into the supposed contents of each of the 9 secret books, and investigate the strange historical anomalies and brilliant minds, from the enigmatic Pope Sylvester II to the visionary Vikram Sarabhai, who some believe were connected to this timeless cabal. This is more than a history lesson. It is an invitation to look at our world through a different lens, to question the official narrative, and to wonder if, just maybe, the most powerful forces shaping our destiny are the ones we were never meant to see. So settle in and open your mind to the possibility that the greatest story ever told is one that has been hiding in plain sight all along. To understand the enduring power of this legend, we must first travel back to a pivotal moment of profound transformation. The year is 273 before the Common Era, and the setting is the sprawling Mauryan Empire in ancient India, ruled by the formidable Emperor Asoka. For the early part of his reign, Asoka was a conqueror in the classic mold, expanding his territory through ruthless military campaigns. His ambitions reached their bloody climax at the war for Kalinga, a wealthy and independent kingdom on the coast. The conflict was not a simple skirmish, it was a cataclysm. Historical accounts, supported by Asoka's own later edicts carved into stone, describe a scene of almost unimaginable horror. The ground was soaked with the blood of 100,000 slain soldiers, and countless more civilians, men, women, and children, were dragged away from their homes as captives. The air, once filled with the sounds of a thriving civilization, was now thick with the groans of the dying and the stench of death. It is said that Asoka himself walked through the carnage of the conquered city, and the sheer scale of the suffering he had unleashed struck him with the force of a divine blow. The victory he had sought now felt like the most bitter of defeats. This was not just a military victory, it was an existential crisis that shattered his worldview. In the haunting silence that followed the battle, a new and terrifying realization dawned on the emperor. He saw that the very tools of his success, advanced military strategy, sophisticated weaponry, and the organized application of knowledge, were the very instruments that had created this hell on earth. His mind turned to the future, to the even more devastating discoveries that lay just beyond the horizon of human understanding. He feared that if such power were left unchecked in the hands of future tyrants or even well-intentioned but foolish leaders, it would inevitably lead to the complete annihilation of humanity. Knowledge itself, he concluded, was not the problem. It was the human heart so easily corrupted by ambition, greed, and the thirst for power. This epiphany became the catalyst for one of the most radical and ambitious secret projects ever conceived. If humanity could not be trusted with its own most dangerous discoveries, then those discoveries would have to be taken away, hidden, and placed under a permanent and benevolent guardianship. And so, the legend tells us the grand design was born. Asoka did not simply outlaw this knowledge. He understood that to suppress it completely would be to stunt human progress. Instead, he devised a more nuanced and brilliant solution. He summoned 9 of the most brilliant and ethically sound men from across his vast empire, masters of philosophy, medicine, physics, psychology, and other nascent sciences. To each of these 9, he entrusted a sacred and eternal duty. They were to become the anonymous custodians of human destiny. Each man was assigned one specific and potent field of knowledge, which he would compile into a single, comprehensive book. But this was not a passive library. Their mission was dynamic and ongoing. They were not just to guard these books, but to actively update them through the centuries, incorporating new discoveries while ensuring those discoveries never saw the light of day until humanity was spiritually and morally ready for them. Their identities were to be erased from public record, and they would operate in absolute secrecy, passing their responsibilities down to a single, carefully chosen successor generation after generation. This was not a temporary commission. It was the founding of a perpetual secret society, a hidden firewall against human self-destruction, designed to last for millennia. The 9 unknown men were thus charged with the ultimate paradox: to use their supreme intellect not to rule the world, but to silently and invisibly protect it from itself. So who were these first 9 architects of secrecy? The legend paints them not as mere bureaucrats or soldiers, but as the supreme minds of their age, each a grandmaster in a field of knowledge that Asoka deemed too volatile for public consumption. Their names are lost to official history, purposefully erased to protect their mission, but we can piece together their likely identities and expertise from the roles they were said to fill. Imagine a council comprising a master psychologist from the ancient University of Takshashila, versed in the art of mass influence, a brilliant physician from the Ganges Plain who understood the very secrets of life and death, an alchemist who could manipulate matter itself, and a strategist whose understanding of societal structures could guide or destabilize civilizations. They were likely drawn from the far corners of Asoka's empire, representing a synthesis of Indian, Persian, and even Greek knowledge, making the society a truly cosmopolitan and intellectual powerhouse from its very inception. The genius of Asoka's plan, however, lay not just in the selection of these first 9, but in the system he established for their perpetual existence. The society was designed as a living entity, not a static monument. This is where the concept of succession becomes absolutely critical. The original members were not immortal, so a flawless method for replacing them was the key to the society's survival across centuries. When one of the 9 was nearing the end of his life, his sacred duty was to identify and meticulously groom a single successor. This was not a simple inheritance passed to a son or a friend. It was a rigorous selection process based solely on intellectual brilliance, moral integrity, and a proven understanding of the specific field of knowledge. The successor had to be someone who understood the immense responsibility of wielding such power without ever being tempted to abuse it. This succession process transformed the secret society of the Nine Unknown Men into something far more formidable than a one-generation project. It became an unbroken chain of custodians, a timeless institution. Think of it as a relay race spanning thousands of years, where a single, priceless baton of knowledge is passed from one hand to the next with flawless precision. This mechanism granted the society its most defining characteristic, immortality. Empires rose and fell, languages were born and died, and entire cultures vanished, yet the Nine supposedly endured. They watched history unfold from the shadows, their collective wisdom accumulating with each passing generation, their understanding of their respective books deepening beyond what any single lifetime of study could achieve. They became the permanent, silent guardians Asoka envisioned, a constant and subtle counterweight to humanity's reckless ambitions, always working to ensure that our most powerful discoveries would not become our final ones. This brings us directly to the first and perhaps most unsettling of the 9 secret books, the one dedicated to the science of propaganda and psychological warfare. If the society's goal was to prevent humanity from destroying itself, then controlling the very tools of thought and belief would be the logical starting point. This first book was not a simple manual on writing persuasive speeches. It was said to be the complete and ultimate understanding of the human mind as a collective entity. It detailed the fundamental laws of mass psychology, the hidden levers and pressure points that can make an entire population embrace an idea, fear a phantom, or march willingly to its own destruction. Imagine a text that codified the principles of crowd control, the art of creating scapegoats, the methodology for eroding critical thinking, and the precise recipes for forging unshakable cults of personality. It would have contained knowledge on how language, symbols, and repeated narratives can be weaponized to reshape reality itself in the minds of the masses. The terrifying implication here is that what we in the modern era consider to be sophisticated techniques of influence, from Edward Bernays' work on public relations in the 1920s to the vast digital ecosystems of today, might merely be the crude, rediscovered fragments of this ancient, perfected science. Think about the sheer power of a modern political campaign. It doesn't just present policies, it crafts a narrative, identifies an enemy, uses targeted emotional appeals, and repeats slogans until they feel like innate truth. Now consider the possibility that this is not a new art form, but a pale imitation of a system so advanced that its creators understood the neurological and sociological triggers with the precision of a physicist understanding a mathematical formula. The book would have contained the master template for all of this, explaining not just the how, but the why certain fears are universal, why certain symbols hold power across cultures, and how to manufacture consensus from the top down. This concept becomes even more chilling when we look at the engine of modern society, social media. The algorithms that dictate what we see in our feeds are not neutral. They are designed to capture and hold our attention, and they do this by learning our psychological biases, our fears, and our desires. They create echo chambers that reinforce our beliefs and filter bubbles that shield us from contradictory information. This is a form of mass psychological manipulation happening on a global scale, albeit one driven by commercial incentives rather than a secret council. But what if these algorithms are accidentally stumbling upon the very principles laid out in that first book? The principle that a population can be pacified, divided, or mobilized not by force, but by feeding it a curated version of reality that feels entirely of its own making. The Book of Propaganda would have been the original source code for this entire field of influence, a guide to building the invisible cages of the mind. The ultimate purpose of the 9 unknown men possessing such a book aligns perfectly with Asoka's dread. By safeguarding this knowledge, they were preventing any single tyrant or regime from gaining access to the ultimate tool of control. A dictator with an army can oppress a people, but a dictator who also masters this book could make the people love their oppression, cheer for their own subjugation, and vilify anyone who suggests they are not free. The society's role, then, would be to act as a subtle counterweight. In times when a dangerous demagogue began to rise, using crude but effective forms of mass manipulation, the keepers of the first book might use their deeper understanding to subtly undermine those efforts, to introduce dissonant ideas, or to fortify the critical thinking of key individuals. They wouldn't fight the battle with armies, but with a superior knowledge of the battlefield of human consciousness itself, ensuring that the ultimate weapons of the mind were never fully wielded by those who would use them for absolute domination. If the first book was about mastering the external world through the mind, the second book turned its gaze inward to the most complex and miraculous system known, the human body itself. This volume was dedicated to the science of physiology, but not in the way we understand it today. It was rumored to be an encyclopedia of life force, a complete map of the body's hidden potentials and ultimate limits. Within its pages supposedly lay the secrets to manipulating biological processes in ways that seem to defy nature. Legends speak of techniques that could kill a person with a single, precise touch by disrupting the body's vital energy, a concept that echoes the martial art of Vimana from southern India or the mysterious dim mak from Chinese lore. But this power was merely one side of the coin. The same profound understanding of the body's energy channels and pressure points could be used to heal, to accelerate regeneration to a supernatural degree, and even to halt the aging process entirely. The ultimate goal encoded in this second book was nothing less than biological immortality, the ability to maintain the body in a perpetual state of youth and vitality, free from disease and decay. This ambition to conquer death is not a modern fantasy. It is one of humanity's oldest and most persistent quests, and ancient India was a hotbed of such exploration. The practices of yoga and pranayama, or breath control, are living testaments to this deep-seated belief that the human body is a vehicle that can be perfected and transcended. Through rigorous physical postures, controlled breathing, and intense meditation, yogis have long sought to purify the body, channel its latent energy, and achieve states of suspended animation or incredible longevity. The legend of the second book suggests that these widespread practices are merely the outer, exoteric branches of a much deeper and more potent science that was deliberately concealed. The 9 unknown men, according to this theory, possessed the complete inner doctrine. They knew the exact biochemical and bioenergetic mechanisms that practices like pranayama influence, understanding how to regulate metabolism, repair cellular telomeres, and purge the body of toxins at a fundamental level. This wasn't just philosophy, it was a precise, actionable technology of the self. When we examine these ancient claims through the lens of modern science, the gap between myth and reality begins to blur in startling ways. The field of regenerative medicine is now actively pursuing what the second book might have described. Scientists are experimenting with stem cells to repair damaged organs, researching the potential of gene editing tools like CRISPR to eliminate hereditary diseases, and investigating compounds that can clear senescent, or zombie, cells from the body to reverse aspects of aging. Research into the biology of extremophiles, creatures that can regenerate entire limbs or enter states of cryptobiosis, aims to unlock secrets that could one day be applied to humans. The quest for biological immortality is no longer the stuff of alchemical fantasy. It is a multi-billion-dollar scientific frontier. The whispers of the second book seem to predict this very path, suggesting that our most cutting-edge laboratories are slowly and painstakingly rediscovering a knowledge system that was codified and sealed away millennia ago. Consider the fascinating work on telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of our chromosomes that shorten as we age. Some modern studies on lifestyle interventions, including stress management and diet, suggest we can slow this shortening. Now hold that thought and reflect on the purported contents of the second book. If it contained the secrets of life extension, it would have necessarily included an understanding of cellular aging long before the invention of the microscope. The idea that a group of ancient masters might have possessed not just the philosophical concept of longevity, but the practical, biochemical means to achieve it, forces us to reconsider the limits of historical scientific achievement. Were they simply brilliant guessers, or did they have access to an empirical understanding of the body that was lost to the rest of the world for centuries? The simultaneous emergence of life extension research in Silicon Valley and the renewed interest in ancient wellness practices creates a compelling echo across time, pointing toward a unified goal that the secret society of the Nine Unknown Men may have been overseeing all along. While the second book focused on perfecting the individual human body, the third volume in this legendary collection casts its net over the entire living world, venturing into a realm so small it was invisible to the ancients, yet so powerful it could reshape creation itself. This is the book dedicated to microbiology and biotechnology, a text said to contain the fundamental blueprints of life at its most elemental level. Imagine a manual written 2,000 years before the invention of the microscope, a document that purportedly detailed the existence of bacteria and viruses, not as concepts but as tangible entities to be manipulated. The claims surrounding this third book are perhaps the most alarming of all. It was rumored to hold the formulas for crafting specific plagues, designer pathogens that could target certain populations or even individuals, as well as the corresponding universal panaceas, cures for any disease known or unknown. Beyond mere healing and harming, the text allegedly delved into the very alteration of life forms, providing instructions on how to hybridize species, accelerate evolution, and engineer biological entities to serve specific purposes. In essence, this book represented the ultimate power over the biosphere, the ability to play the role of a god with the building blocks of nature. This notion of ancient masters possessing such a sophisticated understanding of germ theory and genetics seems impossible on its face. Yet, we find strange and persistent echoes of this idea woven throughout historical texts and folklore. Consider the recurring motif of the poisoned well, a classic act of biological warfare in antiquity. Armies would catapult diseased corpses over city walls or contaminate water supplies, demonstrating a pragmatic, if crude, understanding that illness could be weaponized. But the knowledge in the third book would have gone far beyond this simple contamination. It would have involved the cultivation, refinement, and even the genetic tailoring of pathogens. Then there are the ancient Indian epics like the Mahabharata, which describe fantastic creatures and chimeras, beings that are hybrid blends of different animals or even humans and beasts. While often dismissed as mythology, these stories could be a cultural memory or a leaked rumor of a time when such biological blending was not just imagined, but was a practiced, if highly secret, science. The third book transforms these myths from fairy tales into potential records of a lost biotechnology. The leap from these ancient whispers to our modern reality is a short and terrifying one. Look at the sudden and inexplicable emergence of new diseases throughout history, from the Black Death in the 14th century to the COVID-19 pandemic in our own time. While most have natural origins, the consistent pattern raises a haunting question for conspiracy theorists. Could some of these outbreaks be more than random zoonotic events? If a group like the Nine Unknown Men existed, and they indeed possessed this third book, their primary mission would be to prevent its misuse. But what if, on rare occasions, a fragment of this knowledge was stolen or leaked? Or more chillingly, what if the society itself, in its role as a planetary guardian, deemed it necessary to release a controlled pathogen to curb a dangerously expanding or destructive human population? This is a dark and controversial line of thought, but it is one that fits the pattern of a group acting as a hidden regulator for humanity, using the most direct tools available to maintain a long-term balance. On the flip side of this terrifying coin is the equally stunning acceleration of our own biological sciences. The rapid development of messenger RNA vaccines during the recent pandemic seemed to materialize almost overnight, a scientific feat that left many in awe. The field of genetic engineering, particularly with tools like CRISPR, is advancing at a breakneck pace, allowing scientists to edit the code of life with increasing precision. We are now standing at the threshold of being able to eliminate hereditary diseases, create drought-resistant crops, and even, controversially, design so-called designer babies. From an outside perspective, this rapid progress can appear almost miraculous, as if humanity suddenly unlocked a door that had been sealed for ages. Could it be that our scientific community is not so much discovering these principles for the first time, but is instead independently stumbling upon the very same truths that were hidden away in the third book? The simultaneous global push in biotechnology might look less like independent parallel invention and more like the controlled, gradual release of a knowledge long held in reserve, now deemed safe for a humanity on the cusp of mastering it anyway. This creates a profound and unsettling duality around the purpose of the third book. In the wrong hands, it would be the ultimate doomsday weapon, a means of orchestrating genocide or holding the world hostage with engineered viruses. This perfectly aligns with Asoka's original fear, but in the hands of the benevolent custodians, its purpose would be exactly the opposite. They would use this supreme knowledge to monitor the planetary ecosystem, to discreetly neutralize naturally occurring pandemics before they could become extinction-level events, and to gently guide medical science toward true cures. They wouldn't announce their victories. There would no public celebration for a plague they quietly contained in a remote region. Their success would be measured in disasters that never happened, in the continued, fragile existence of a species still struggling to understand the immense power it is only just beginning to wield. The third book, therefore, represents the pinnacle of the society's paradox. It is both the most potent weapon of mass destruction and the most powerful tool of salvation, its moral character defined entirely by the silent, unseen judgment of the Nine. Moving from the intricate code of life to the fundamental building blocks of the physical world, we encounter the fourth book, a volume that has captivated the human imagination for centuries, the Book of Alchemy. Popular culture has reduced alchemy to a single, tantalizing goal, the transmutation of lead into gold. But within the legend of the Nine, this was never the true prize. The fourth book was said to contain secrets far more profound, a deep and systematic understanding of the very nature of matter and energy. It wasn't about creating wealth, it was about mastering the cosmos at its most elemental level. The concept of turning one element into another was simply the outward, practical test of a much grander theory. If one could truly understand the fundamental substance from which all matter is formed, and the forces that bind it into different shapes, then transmutation would be a natural consequence. This book, therefore, was likely the ultimate treatise on quantum physics and chemistry, written millennia before those terms existed, exploring the hidden relationships between the tangible world we perceive and the swirling sea of energy that underlies it. This ancient pursuit finds a startlingly direct parallel in the heart of modern science. Today's particle accelerators, like the Large Hadron Collider, are in a very real sense our most advanced alchemical laboratories. Scientists smash atoms together at nearly the speed of light, not to create gold, but to witness the moment of transmutation itself, the fleeting instant where energy condenses into new, often unstable particles. They are probing the same mystery that the alchemists did. What is matter, really? The alchemical concept of a prima materia, or first matter, a single, uniform substance from which all elements arise, echoes the modern physicist's search for a unified field theory or a theory of everything. Both quests are driven by the belief that the dazzling diversity of the physical world, from the iron in our blood to the silicon in computer chips, stems from a handful of simple, elegant laws and a common origin. The experiments are different, but the fundamental question is identical. Nowhere is this connection more potent than in humanity's ongoing quest to harness nuclear fusion. For decades, scientists have been trying to replicate the power of the sun here on Earth, forcing atomic nuclei to merge and release colossal amounts of energy. This process is the ultimate transmutation. It is how stars forge heavier elements like carbon and oxygen from the simple hydrogen left over from the Big Bang. Every star is a celestial alchemical furnace, the legendary philosopher's stone, said to enable transmutation and grant immortality, can be reinterpreted through this lens. Perhaps it wasn't a physical object, but a metaphor for the mastery of energy, the knowledge required to safely initiate and control a fusion reaction. The immortality it granted could have been allegorical, representing the limitless power and longevity such an energy source would provide a civilization. The fact that our brightest minds, with access to supercomputers and advanced materials, still struggle to achieve stable fusion forces us to wonder, did an ancient, concealed science already solve this puzzle? Could the fourth book have contained the principles of plasma containment or the geometry of magnetic fields required to tame a star? This perspective forces a dramatic reinterpretation of historical alchemical texts. The famously cryptic and symbolic illustrations of dragons eating their own tails, of the chemical wedding between a king and queen, of intricate labyrinths and Ouroboros symbols, were likely not mere mysticism. They were a deliberate code, a necessary veil to protect dangerously powerful information. A diagram of a serpent coiled in a specific pattern might represent a toroidal magnetic field, essential for containing superheated plasma. The repeated process of dissolution and coagulation, a central theme in alchemy, mirrors the cycle of breaking atomic bonds and forging new ones. These texts were not the ramblings of proto-scientists obsessed with gold. They were the encrypted notebooks of researchers working with concepts so advanced that they had no language to describe them other than allegory and symbol. The secret society, by guarding the master key to this code in the fourth book, ensured that this knowledge remained out of reach until humanity developed the mathematical and ethical framework to understand it without immediately turning it into a weapon. The shadow of the atomic bomb looms large over this entire discussion, serving as the perfect, terrifying example of Asoka's core fear. The Manhattan Project was in essence a brutal and accelerated form of alchemy. Scientists learned to transmute one element, uranium, into others through fission, unlocking energy on a scale previously reserved for stars. The result was the most destructive force ever wielded by humankind. This is precisely the kind of application the Nine Unknown Men were supposedly founded to prevent. The possession of the fourth book would have given them foreknowledge of this potential. Their centuries-long vigil would have involved monitoring humanity's progress toward understanding the atom, and their purpose would have been to ensure that when that threshold was finally crossed, it would not lead to total self-annihilation. Perhaps their influence, if it exists, was felt in the subtle ethical debates among the physicists themselves, or in the eventual establishment of non-proliferation treaties, a gentle, unseen hand guiding a stumbling giant away from the cliff's edge. The fourth book thus represents the ultimate responsibility that comes with ultimate power, the sobering understanding that the secrets of the universe itself are neutral, and their use for boundless energy or for boundless destruction rests entirely on the wisdom of the one who holds the key. Now we move from the mastery of physical matter into a domain that feels even more like science fiction, yet is deeply embedded in the legend, the fifth book, dedicated to the science of communication. This was not a simple guide to learning foreign tongues or decoding ancient scripts. Its scope was said to be universal, encompassing the very essence of how information is transmitted and received across all possible mediums. The book supposedly detailed the fundamental principles of language itself, from the symbolic grammar of human speech to the mathematical patterns in animal calls and the chemical signals used by plants. But its most astounding claim is that it contained protocols for communicating with intelligence beyond our world, established methods for initiating and sustaining a dialogue with extraterrestrial beings. This transforms the Society's mandate from safeguarding the Earth to acting as potential interstellar ambassadors, holding the cosmic rulebook for first contact long before humanity even looked to the stars. To grasp the immense scale of this, consider the limitations of our own modern search for alien life. Programs like SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, primarily scan the cosmos for narrow-band radio signals or laser pulses, forms of communication that are logical and efficient for a technological civilization like our own. But this approach makes a critical and perhaps naive assumption that an alien intelligence would communicate using a technology and a logic that we can readily recognize and decipher. The fifth book would have bypassed this entirely. Its knowledge was not about building a better radio telescope. It was about understanding the foundational nature of consciousness and information. It might have proposed that true universal communication operates on a level beyond electromagnetic waves, perhaps through quantum entanglement, gravitational waves, or modalities of physics we have not yet discovered. The book would have been a primer on cosmic linguistics, teaching how to construct a message that is not based on human cultural context, but on the universal constants of mathematics, physics, and fundamental logic. This idea of a hidden, advanced science of communication offers a provocative lens through which to view some of history's most persistent and puzzling mysteries. Take, for instance, the many ancient cultures that speak of star gods or celestial visitors who brought them knowledge. The Dogon people of Mali, for example, have long held detailed astronomical knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the existence of its dense, invisible companion star, Sirius B, a fact Western science only confirmed in the 19th century. Mainstream anthropology explains this as likely cultural contamination from early visitors, but within the framework of our legend, a different possibility emerges. What if this was not a lucky guess, but the result of a fragmentary, inherited memory, a piece of knowledge that originated from the fifth book's repository, perhaps shared with a select few ancient priests or shamans, describing the celestial neighborhood of those we might hope to one day speak with? These ancient accounts of gods from the sky could be a deeply garbled, mythological retelling of an actual, structured attempt at communication, guided by principles kept secret by the Nine. This speculation becomes even more compelling when we look at the explosion of unexplained aerial phenomena in the modern era. The recent shift in official stance on UAP's unidentified aerial phenomena, with military pilots reporting objects performing maneuvers that defy our understanding of physics, has forced a serious public conversation. The standard explanations range from secret military technology to natural atmospheric events, but a fringe theory persists that these could be non-human craft. If the fifth book indeed contained protocols for contact, it stands to reason that the secret society would be monitoring for any signs of a response. Their centuries-long vigil would include watching the skies not with telescopes but with a deeper understanding of what to look for. The sporadic and enigmatic nature of these sightings could be interpreted not as random visits, but as tentative, perhaps even clumsy, attempts at interaction from a civilization that operates on a completely different communicative timescale and technological framework, with the Nine acting as the silent, observing intermediaries. The ultimate role of the fifth book, therefore, ties directly back to Asoka's original dread. Imagine the chaos and potential planetary panic that would ensue if a world leader or a powerful corporation suddenly made definitive contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence without any preparation. The societal, religious, and economic structures of our world could shatter overnight. The knowledge within the fifth book would be the ultimate strategic asset, not for its ability to make contact, but for its guidance on how to manage it. The Society's purpose would be to act as a buffer, a diplomatic corps for all of humanity. They would use their understanding to interpret any potential signals, to assess the intentions behind any phenomena, and to gently guide our global civilization toward a state of maturity where such a revelation would not cause its collapse. Their possession of this book is not about keeping us from the stars. It is about ensuring that when we finally take that step, we do not fall. They are the steadying hand on the shoulder of a child about to meet a giant, ensuring the encounter is one of wonder, not of terror. Of all the forces that govern our universe, gravity is the one that most defines our daily reality, pinning us to the earth and dictating the very structure of the cosmos. It is also, paradoxically, the force we understand the least. While we can describe its effects with Einstein's equations, we still don't know what gravity is at a fundamental level. This is where the legend of the sixth book becomes truly mind-bending. It is said to be entirely dedicated to the secrets of gravitation, containing not just a deeper theory, but the practical engineering principles for its manipulation. Within its pages supposedly lay the blueprints for Vimanas, the spectacular flying chariots described in ancient Indian texts like the Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are not simple, fantastical depictions. The texts provide shockingly detailed accounts. They speak of craft that could hover silently, travel at immense speeds, and maneuver with an agility that defies conventional aerodynamics. Some descriptions even mention advanced features like invisibility cloaks and weapons capable of releasing energy beams, suggesting a technology that integrated gravity control with other powerful systems. The sixth book, therefore, represents the ultimate key to breaking the chains that bind us to our world, offering the freedom to traverse the skies and perhaps even the void of space itself. When we examine these ancient Sanskrit accounts with a modern engineer's eye, the parallels to contemporary aerospace concepts are startling and difficult to dismiss as pure imagination. The Vimanas are often described as having a pear or cigar shape, a form factor that closely resembles the design of modern dirigibles or even some conceptual spacecraft. The texts frequently mention that these vehicles were powered by mercury or other liquid metals. To the modern mind, this immediately brings to mind the use of mercury as a propellant in advanced propulsion systems, specifically in ion thrusters used on some satellites where charged particles are accelerated to create thrust. More profoundly, mercury is a superconductor at very low temperatures, and superconductivity is intimately linked to the manipulation of magnetic and gravitational fields. The idea that the Vimana's engines involved spinning or heating mercury could be a mythological description of a system that created a local distortion in the gravitational field, a working anti-gravity drive. This notion of overcoming gravity is not a forgotten dream of the ancient world. It is a fringe but persistent and serious area of research in our own time. For decades, NASA and other aerospace agencies have investigated concepts like electrogravitics, which explores the possible connection between electricity and gravity. More recently, public attention has been captured by patents filed by the U.S. Navy for bizarre-looking craft like the TR-3B, which conspiracy theorists claim utilizes a gravity-disrupting technology. The described method often involves a circular plasma-filled ring that reduces the craft's mass, allowing it to achieve incredible speeds and maneuvers. The very fact that such patents exist and are taken seriously enough to be granted, even if they are merely speculative or for defensive purposes, indicates that the scientific establishment acknowledges the theoretical possibility of gravity control. It suggests that our most advanced black-budget research and development might be chasing a goal that was supposedly achieved and then hidden away millennia ago. The connection becomes even more compelling when we consider the work of individuals who stood at the crossroads of established science and the unexplained. One of the most famous cases is that of Nikola Tesla. Throughout his life, Tesla spoke of unlocking new principles of physics that would allow humanity to master the forces of nature. His later work delved into the concepts of a dynamic theory of gravity and the harnessing of the ether, ideas that were considered heretical by his contemporaries but bear a striking resemblance to some of the concepts associated with Vimana law. While there is no direct evidence linking Tesla to the legend of the Nine Unknown Men, his pattern of revolutionary, almost prescient invention, and his claims of having received inspiration in vivid flashes, fits the profile of a mind that might have inadvertently tapped into a stream of hidden knowledge. If fragments of the sixth book's principles had ever leaked into the wider world, either through deliberate dissemination or accidental discovery, individuals of Tesla's genius would be the most likely conduits for their partial rediscovery. The ultimate purpose of the secret society safeguarding this sixth book aligns perfectly with their overarching mission. In the hands of a peaceful civilization, gravity control would mean free, limitless energy and the opening of the final frontier. But in the hands of a militaristic empire, it would be the ultimate weapon. A vehicle that can ignore inertia and gravity would be unstoppable, capable of delivering a payload anywhere on Earth with impunity. It would render all ground-based defenses and even nuclear deterrence completely obsolete. Asoka's fear was precisely this, that a technology of such overwhelming superiority would guarantee global domination for any power that wielded it exclusively. By locking away the complete science of gravitation, the Nine were preventing a single, potentially tyrannical regime from achieving a permanent stranglehold on the entire planet. Their vigil ensured that humanity would have to mature politically and ethically, learning to cooperate on a global scale before it could be trusted with the keys to the sky. The silence of the Vimanas in our historical record, then, is not proof of their mythical nature, but potentially the greatest success story of this ancient guardianship, the definitive prevention of an arms race that would have ended only with one absolute ruler presiding over a conquered world. From the invisible currents of gravity, we now turn our gaze to the most expansive mystery of all, the origin and structure of the cosmos itself. This brings us to the seventh book, a volume dedicated to the science of cosmogony. While the previous books dealt with forces and systems within our world, this one tackles the ultimate questions. Where did everything come from? What is the fundamental architecture of existence? The legend claims this book contains a complete cosmological model, a grand narrative of the universe's birth and evolution that might not only align with our modern Big Bang theory, but could potentially elaborate on it, venturing into realms like dark matter and the multiverse with an authority that seems impossible for its time. It suggests that the ancient custodians possessed a profound, perhaps even complete, astronomical insight that viewed the cosmos not as a static creation of gods, but as a dynamic, evolving entity governed by precise, knowable laws. To appreciate the sheer audacity of this claim, we need to contrast it with the prevailing worldviews of the ancient era. Most creation myths from 2,000 years ago were deeply theological. The universe was often seen as the handiwork of a deity or a pantheon, brought into being through a series of divine commands or epic struggles. Order was imposed from the outside by a conscious will. The model within the seventh book, however, would have been radically different. It would have been a scientific cosmology, one that described a self-contained universe operating on immutable principles of physics. Imagine a text that spoke of a primordial singularity, a state of infinite density from which space and time themselves erupted. It might have described this not as a random explosion, but as a deliberate, cyclical process, a concept that finds a powerful echo in the ancient Hindu concept of the universe undergoing endless cycles of creation, preservation, and dissolution, known as the days and nights of Brahma. This isn't a one-time creation myth, it's a theory of a breathing, pulsating cosmos. The parallels to our most advanced modern theories are where this concept becomes truly staggering. Our current standard model of cosmology is the Big Bang, supported by overwhelming evidence like the cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of that initial hot, dense state. Yet, this model has its own unresolved mysteries. For instance, we know that the visible matter we can see, all the stars, galaxies, and planets, accounts for only about 5% of the universe. The rest is composed of mysterious, invisible components we call dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter provides the extra gravitational glue that holds galaxies together, while dark energy is the mysterious force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate. These are the great frontiers of modern physics. The breathtaking suggestion of the seventh book is that it might have contained the solutions to these very mysteries, describing the properties and interactions of these dark components long before our telescopes ever hinted at their existence. Consider the ancient Sanskrit concept of akasha, often translated as ether or space. In many philosophical texts, akasha is not mere emptiness. It is a fundamental, all-pervading field that is the substrate of all matter and the medium for sound and energy. This bears a striking conceptual resemblance to the modern Higgs field, an invisible energy field that permeates the entire universe and gives elementary particles their mass. Furthermore, the idea of a cosmic substance that is unseen yet fundamental to the structure of reality aligns remarkably well with our current understanding of dark matter. Could the seventh book have detailed the nature of akasha, not as a philosophical concept, but as a physical description of the dark universe? The possibility that an ancient text might have contained a unified theory linking the visible and invisible cosmos forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of human scientific achievement. This leads to the most mind-expanding concept of all, the multiverse. In recent decades, some theoretical physicists working with string theory and the implications of cosmic inflation have proposed that our Big Bang may not have been a unique event. Instead, it could be just one bubble in a vast, frothing multiverse, an infinite ensemble of parallel universes, each with its own unique physical laws and constants. This is currently the farthest frontier of theoretical cosmology. Astonishingly, the legend of the seventh book suggests that the ancients were already there. Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain philosophies are replete with descriptions of countless worlds and endless cycles of time, with multiple universes coexisting like bubbles in an ocean. These are not presented as mere metaphors but as detailed cosmological realities. The seventh book in this context would be the master technical manual explaining the mechanics of this cosmic foam, the principles that govern the birth, death, and interaction of these countless realities. The purpose of the secret society in guarding this ultimate cosmic knowledge is both profound and humbling. Understanding the true origin and architecture of the universe is the pinnacle of scientific inquiry. But such knowledge, in the wrong hands or introduced to a civilization not ready for it, could be existentially devastating. If a powerful regime discovered that our universe is just one transient bubble in an infinite multiverse, it could shatter all concepts of meaning, morality, and purpose, potentially leading to nihilism and societal collapse. Conversely, if this knowledge were used to develop technology that could somehow interact with the fabric of space-time or traverse between universes, the potential for catastrophic misuse is unimaginable. By sealing away the seventh book, the 9 unknown men were not trying to keep humanity in the dark. They were acting as protective parents, ensuring that our species first developed the philosophical and spiritual maturity to grapple with the cosmos's ultimate truths without being annihilated by them. Their long vigil over cosmogony was a safeguard for the human soul, ensuring that when we finally unlock the deepest secrets of existence, we do so with wisdom, not with despair or destructive ambition. Now we arrive at a book that illuminates one of the universe's most fundamental and paradoxical phenomena, the 8th volume, dedicated entirely to the nature and control of light. This is not merely a treatise on optics or vision. It delves into the very essence of light as the primary mediator of reality, a bridge between the world of matter and the world of information. The legends suggest this book contained the complete resolution to a debate that would only captivate physicists 2,000 years later, the wave-particle duality. It would have described light not as one thing or the other, but as something far more complex and wonderful, a fundamental entity that behaves as both a particle, a discrete packet of energy we call a photon, and a wave, a spread-out oscillation in fields depending on how we choose to observe it. This profound understanding was likely just the starting point, laying the groundwork for technologies that sound like they belong in the distant future, including perfect invisibility, weaponized light, and the theoretical pathways to travel at the universe's ultimate speed limit. Consider the concept of an invisibility cloak, a staple of fantasy and folklore for centuries. While to us it seems like magic, the science behind it is rooted in the precise manipulation of light. For an object to become invisible, light must be persuaded to flow around it, like water flowing around a smooth stone in a stream, and then continue on its original path without any distortion. This requires controlling not just the direction of light, but its speed and phase with unimaginable precision. Modern science is only just beginning to scratch the surface of this possibility through the field of metamaterials. These are artificial materials engineered with nanostructures that can bend light in ways not found in nature, creating limited cloaking effects for specific wavelengths like microwaves. The achievement is monumental, yet it is still in its infancy compared to the legendary capabilities described for the 8th book, which might have detailed how to render large-scale objects completely invisible to the full spectrum of visible light, a feat that would require a perfect dynamic control over light's interaction with matter. Beyond concealment, the 8th book likely explored the opposite end of the spectrum, the concentration and weaponization of light. The advanced lasers we are familiar with today, which can cut through steel or perform delicate eye surgery, are powerful tools, but they operate on principles we understand. The book's knowledge would have gone much further, perhaps describing methods for creating coherent light beams of unimaginable power and focused beams that could transmit energy over vast interstellar distances, or in a darker application, could be used as clean, surgical weapons of war. This connects directly back to the ancient Indian epics, which describe celestial weapons like the Brahmastra that released a blaze as bright as 10,000 suns and could vaporize entire armies. For a long time, these descriptions were dismissed as poetic hyperbole, but through the lens of the 8th book, they begin to sound less like mythology and more like garbled accounts of a technology that utilized focused energy on a catastrophic scale. A technology so dangerous that its underlying principles had to be sealed away to prevent its rediscovery and misuse. The most profound implication of mastering light, however, lies in the realm of travel and communication. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, nothing with mass can ever reach the speed of light. It is a cosmic barrier. But what if the 8th book contained a deeper understanding of this rule, or even a way to circumvent it? One of the most tantalizing concepts in modern theoretical physics is the Alcubierre warp drive, a hypothetical concept that suggests a spacecraft could travel faster than light, not by moving through space, but by contracting the space in front of it and expanding the space behind it, effectively riding a wave of distorted spacetime. This requires the manipulation of exotic matter with negative energy density, a concept that currently exists only in equations. Yet, the knowledge within the 8th book might have detailed the practical steps to achieve such a feat, framing it not as a violation of physics, but as a sophisticated application of it, using controlled light-energy interactions to create the necessary spacetime distortions for what would appear to be superluminal travel. This brings us to the enigmatic figure of Sudarshan, a brilliant Indian-American physicist who made groundbreaking contributions to quantum optics and theoretical physics in the 20th century. He was one of the key figures who helped develop the modern quantum theory of light, and he spent a significant part of his career challenging the established limits of special relativity, proposing a nuanced framework for particles that always travel faster than light, known as tachyons. While there is no evidence to suggest Sudarshan was a member of the secret society, his life's work embodies the very spirit of the eighth book. He was a mind operating at the farthest frontiers of light science, pushing against the boundaries of what was considered possible. His deep connection to both advanced Western physics and his Indian heritage makes him a symbolic figure in this narrative, representing the kind of brilliant intellect that might independently rediscover fragments of a knowledge system that was perfected and hidden long ago. His persistent and often controversial challenges to mainstream physics echo the idea that the complete truth about light may be far stranger and more empowering than our current models allow. The ultimate significance of the secret society guarding this eighth book is a mirror of their overall mission, but with a unique urgency. Light is the universe's ultimate information carrier. It brings us everything we see and know about the cosmos. The power to control it is, in essence, the power to control perceived reality. A civilization that could achieve perfect invisibility could infiltrate and dominate any adversary without a trace. A culture that could weaponize light to the degree suggested in the epics would possess an unstoppable, instantaneous force, and a society that unlocked the secret of light-speed travel would become the master of the galaxy for good or for ill. Asoka's original dread was the concentration of such world-altering power. By taking the complete science of light off the table, the Nine Unknown Men were not stifling progress. They were forcing humanity to evolve socially and ethically first. They ensured that we would have to learn to resolve our conflicts and unite as a species through our own ingenuity before we could be trusted with the keys to the stars, a test we are still in the process of taking. And so we arrive at the ninth and final book, the capstone of this legendary collection, and in many ways the ultimate synthesis of all the others. While the previous volumes dealt with the mastery of physical forces, biological systems, and cosmic principles, this last one tackles the most complex system of all, human society itself. The ninth book is said to be dedicated to sociology, but not as a passive academic study. It is described as a grand unified theory of civilization, a comprehensive guide to the immutable laws that dictate the rise, zenith, and inevitable fall of every empire, kingdom, and nation throughout history. This book would contain the master patterns, the recurring cycles of innovation, consolidation, decadence, and collapse that have played out from ancient Rome to the modern global stage. Its custodians would not merely be historians, they would be ultimate strategists possessing the ability to read the currents of human events with prophetic clarity, and most crucially, to apply subtle pressures to steer the colossal ship of civilization away from the rocks and toward calmer waters. To grasp the power of such a text, consider the work of historians like Arnold Toynbee, who argued that civilizations are not destroyed by external forces, but commit suicide by failing to respond creatively to challenges. Or Oswald Spengler, who saw cultures as organic entities with predictable life cycles of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. The ninth book would have codified these cyclical theories with mathematical precision, identifying the key indicators of each stage. It would detail the social, economic, and psychological markers of a civilization in its vibrant, expansive spring, a time of cultural confidence, technological innovation, and a strong sense of collective purpose. It would then chart the transition into a high summer of imperial consolidation, where institutions become rigid, artistic expression becomes formulaic, and a focus on luxury and comfort begins to subtly replace the pioneering spirit. The book would offer a diagnostic for the autumn phase where societal trust erodes, political polarization deepens, and the ruling elite becomes detached from the populace. Finally, it would describe the winter of collapse characterized by economic contraction, institutional failure, and a widespread crisis of meaning. Imagine the practical application of this knowledge in the hands of a secret, perpetual council. Their purpose would not be to prevent the natural evolution of societies that would be as futile as trying to stop the seasons. Instead, their mission would be to prevent a terminal, catastrophic collapse that could set human progress back by centuries or even lead to extinction. They would act as systemic doctors for the body politic, for instance during a period of extreme wealth inequality. A classic precursor to civil unrest, the keepers of the ninth book would understand this not as a random injustice, but as a symptom of a system entering a dangerous phase. Their intervention wouldn't be a public manifesto. It might involve the discreet dissemination of economic ideas to a key reformer, or the subtle support of a social program that addresses the root cause of the disparity, gently nudging the system back toward equilibrium without anyone ever realizing an invisible hand was at work. The book's knowledge would extend to the very fabric of what holds a society together, its culture. The custodians would understand that a civilization's core mythology, its shared stories and values, is its immune system. When that narrative becomes corrupted or hollowed out, the society becomes vulnerable to ideological viruses and internal decay. The ninth book would provide a deep understanding of cultural memetics, how ideas spread, mutate, and either strengthen or weaken the social contract. This explains why the society would be so concerned with the content of the first book on propaganda. They would need to be the masters of narrative to combat the destructive narratives that arise naturally in a civilization's decline. They could subtly bolster unifying cultural elements or introduce new, life-giving myths through art, literature, or even popular entertainment, all designed to reinforce social cohesion and ethical resilience at a subconscious level. This long-term perspective transforms the secret society from mere guardians into something resembling gardeners for humanity. They would operate on a timescale incomprehensible to politicians or corporate leaders focused on quarterly reports or election cycles. While a world leader might make a decision for short-term gain that destabilizes a region for decades, the Nine would be playing a game that spans centuries. A war that seems catastrophic in the moment might, from their vantage point, be a necessary recalibration that prevents a far larger, continent-consuming conflict 100 years later. A technological revolution that causes massive social disruption might be allowed to proceed because they foresee it ultimately leading to a new era of global connectivity and prosperity. Their decisions would be agonizingly complex, made with a cold, detached logic aimed solely at the perpetual survival and gradual enlightenment of the human species as a whole, even if it meant accepting certain periods of suffering as the lesser of two evils. The existence of the ninth book brings the entire legend of the 9 unknown men full circle, back to Emperor Ashoka's original, haunting epiphany on the battlefield. He saw that knowledge without wisdom leads to destruction. The first 8 books contain the raw, terrifying power to reshape the world, but the ninth book provides the context, the ethical framework, and the strategic wisdom for its application. It is the key that unlocks the responsible use of all the others. Without an understanding of the laws of societal rise and fall, any attempt to use the other books, whether to cure all disease, master gravity, or communicate with aliens, could inadvertently trigger a collapse by creating unsustainable imbalances or gifting ultimate power to an immature civilization. The ninth book is the governor on the engine. The guiding intelligence that ensures humanity's growing power is matched by a corresponding growth in wisdom. In the grand design of Ashoka, the silent, watchful custodians of this final volume are the ultimate guarantors of his hope. that our species might one day evolve to a state where we no longer need guardians because we have finally learned to become guardians of ourselves. The shadowy path of the 9 unknown men, if we are to entertain the legend, winds like a hidden river through the entire course of recorded history, surfacing only in fleeting moments and through the work of a few extraordinary individuals whose genius seemed to arrive from nowhere. The central enigma of their survival across more than 2 millennia hinges on a single, brilliant principle of their design: radical decentralization. Unlike a kingdom or a corporation, this society was never a physical institution with a headquarters or a fixed membership roster. Instead, it is described as a fluid network of 9 autonomous cells, each focused on its specific book, operating independently and often without any knowledge of the other members' identities. This cellular structure is the ultimate defense against discovery or annihilation. You cannot dismantle an organization that has no central node. You cannot expose its leaders because no single person holds all the threads. This allowed them to embed themselves within the very fabric of global society, their members acting as anonymous scholars, physicians, alchemists, and engineers, their true purpose known only to their immediate predecessor and successor. One of the most compelling historical figures often linked to this legend is the enigmatic Pope Sylvester II, who held the papacy around the turn of the first millennium. Born Gerbert of Aurillac in France, he was a scholar of such profound and inexplicable knowledge that his contemporaries accused him of sorcery. He studied in Islamic Spain, a center of learning that had preserved ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, and he allegedly returned to Europe with knowledge that was centuries ahead of its time. He is credited with introducing the Hindu-Arabic numeral system to the West, a mathematical revolution that replaced the clumsy Roman numerals. More mysteriously, he was said to possess a magical bronze head that could answer any question with yes or no, a description that sounds eerily like a primitive binary computer. He also spoke of a vast hidden library containing books of unimaginable power. Could Sylvester have been a keeper or at least a contact of the 9? His role as a pivotal figure who accelerated European science and mathematics fits the pattern of the Society's alleged mission: to gently steer human progress by seeding advanced knowledge into the world at carefully chosen moments, through individuals who could integrate it into the mainstream without revealing its true, guarded source. As we move forward in time, the threads of this narrative seem to intertwine with other famous secret societies, creating a tapestry of hidden influence. The Rosicrucians, who emerged in the early 17th century with manifestos proclaiming a secret brotherhood of enlightened scientists and philosophers dedicated to the reformation of the world, share a striking resonance with the alleged goals of the 9. Both groups profess a commitment to using esoteric knowledge for the betterment of humanity, and both operate from a position of absolute secrecy. The fundamental difference, however, may be one of hierarchy and age. The Rosicrucians and later speculative Freemasonry and even the Bavarian Illuminati could be seen as external, exoteric manifestations, public-facing experiments in societal organization inspired by, or perhaps even accidentally mimicking, the principles of the original, far more ancient and advanced custodians. These younger societies might have been attempting to replicate the grand design with the limited knowledge available to them, while the true 9 continued their work in a deeper, more profound silence, observing these offshoots as one might observe a student's earnest, if imperfect, attempts to solve a master's equation. The colonial era presents a dramatic stage for the Society's alleged interventions. The sudden and overwhelming technological advantage held by European powers over the indigenous cultures of the Americas, Africa, and Asia could be viewed through a sinister lens. Was this merely the natural outcome of a technological gap, or was it the result of a deliberate strategy? If the 9 existed, and their primary mandate was to prevent global domination by any single power, the rapid and chaotic expansion of European empires would have represented a clear and present danger to the planetary balance. Their methods of counteraction would not have involved raising armies but deploying superior knowledge. There are persistent, unverified accounts of certain Indian mystics and yogis possessing foreknowledge of British political maneuvers or even delivering precise, private warnings to colonial officers that halted specific military actions. These stories, often dismissed as folklore, could be interpreted as the subtle, psychological hand of the society at work, using their understanding of human nature and strategy to introduce friction and inefficiency into the colonial machine, slowing its progress just enough to prevent a single empire from achieving total, unassailable control of the world. This brings us to the modern era and the most tantalizing question of all. If the 9 unknown men are real, who among us might be one of them today? The corridors of power and innovation offer several fascinating candidates. Consider the legacy of Vikram Sarabhai, the revered father of the Indian space program. He spearheaded India's peaceful pursuit of space technology with an almost spiritual insistence on using science for human development, not warfare. Under his guidance, India developed satellite and rocket technology with remarkable speed and efficiency, focusing on applications like communication, weather forecasting, and education for its vast rural population. Sarabhai's vision was one of benevolent technological stewardship, perfectly aligning with the purported ethos of the ancient society. His work created a powerful, independent spacefaring nation that acts as a strategic counterweight in Asia, preventing any single power from monopolizing the final frontier. His life's mission seems to be a modern public enactment of the very principles Asoka supposedly encoded, harnessing ultimate power for protection and upliftment, not for conquest. The global pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries, with their immense power over life and death, present another likely domain for the society's influence. The sudden, coordinated development of novel vaccines or the quiet abandonment of certain dangerous biological research paths could be seen as the outcome of market forces and ethical reviews. But it could also reflect the subtle guidance of individuals working with a deeper understanding of the third book, ensuring that breakthroughs in longevity and disease eradication are managed in a way that promotes global stability rather than creating catastrophic demographic or economic shocks. These modern guardians would not be reclusive sages in remote monasteries. They would be directors of research institutes, lead epidemiologists at the World Health Organization, or bioethicists on international oversight committees. Their power lies not in secrecy for its own sake, but in the application of foresight, using their position within the system to guide the colossal ship of technological progress away from the icebergs of unintended consequences. In the sprawling digital landscape of the 21st century, the Society's timeless mission would have found a new and critical battlefield: cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. The keepers of the first book, the masters of propaganda and psychology, would now be focused on the algorithms that shape public opinion on social media. Their goal would be to counter the erosion of truth and the manipulation of the masses by state actors and malicious bots. They might be the anonymous white hat hackers who discreetly patch critical vulnerabilities in global financial networks, preventing a cascade of economic collapse. The custodians of the book on communication would be deeply concerned with the development of artificial general intelligence, the moment when humanity creates a consciousness other than its own. Their role would be to ensure that the foundational ethics and safeguards are woven into the very architecture of a silent, guiding hand in a process that will define the future of all life on Earth. Their survival into our time is not a relic of a bygone age, but a necessary and ongoing vigil, adapting their ancient wisdom to protect a humanity now armed with technologies that are rapidly approaching the godlike powers they were originally created to contain. The theory that Pope Sylvester II was connected to the Nine offers a fascinating explanation for his bewildering intellect, but he is far from the only historical figure whose sudden bursts of genius invite such speculation. Consider the quintessential Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci. His notebooks are a breathtaking torrent of ideas centuries ahead of their time, detailed designs for helicopters, tanks, submarines, and anatomical drawings of stunning accuracy, all created in an era when most of Europe was still mired in medieval thought. The conventional explanation is that Da Vinci was a singular, unprecedented genius, which he undoubtedly was. Yet, the legend of the Nine provides an alternative, or perhaps complementary, narrative. What if Da Vinci's mind was not just inventing, but reinventing? What if he was a brilliant conduit, a man whose unique cognitive abilities allowed him to accidentally tap into, or be subtly guided by, the stream of knowledge safeguarded by the secret society? His work seems to touch directly upon several of the 9 books. His designs for flying machines echo the gravitation principles of the 6th book. His studies of human physiology and the heart mirror the life sciences of the 2nd. And his intricate designs for siege engines and his understanding of water dynamics show a grasp of physics and propaganda through technological intimidation. Aligns with the 1st and 4th books, he wasn't merely a painter, he was a one-man research and development department, and his sudden, inexplicable fluency in so many advanced fields fits the pattern of someone who had accessed a source far beyond the standard libraries of his day. This pattern of inexplicable foresight continues with the enigmatic Nikola Tesla. His visions of a worldwide wireless communication system, his pioneering work with alternating current, and his claims about harvesting limitless free energy from the atmosphere seemed like sheer fantasy to his contemporaries. Tesla spoke of receiving his ideas in vivid, complete flashes of inspiration, seeing his inventions fully formed in his mind's eye before ever drafting a blueprint. This almost psychic method of discovery raises a compelling question. Was Tesla simply a visionary, or was his mind somehow attuned to a frequency of knowledge that was being carefully meted out? His lifelong rivalry with Thomas Edison embodies a central tension in this theory. Edison represented the brute force, incremental process of invention, trial and error, patenting and commercial exploitation. Tesla, in stark contrast, seemed to be pulling fully formed concepts from the ether, concepts that were often too grand and too altruistic for the capitalist world of his time. If the 9 were real, their goal would be the responsible, peaceful application of knowledge. Tesla's dream of free energy for all humanity aligns perfectly with that benevolent ethos, while Edison's more grounded, profit-driven model represents the exact kind of fragmented, competitive application of science that the society was founded to prevent from spiraling out of control. Tesla's tragic end, dying alone and penniless despite his world-changing contributions, could be seen as a failure of his contemporary society to appreciate his gifts. Or, from a more conspiratorial view, it could be the result of the society deciding that his mind was becoming too public and unpredictable a conduit, and that his further work needed to be curtailed. Moving into the modern era, the figure of Vikram Sarabhai presents a different but equally compelling case for a potential connection. As the father of India's space program, Sarabhai's vision was profoundly philosophical. He didn't just want to build rockets, he wanted to use space technology as a tool for national development, focusing on satellite communication for education in remote villages, weather forecasting for farmers, and resource mapping. This benevolent, peaceful application of one of the most powerful technologies ever developed, rocket science, directly mirrors the alleged peaceful mandate of the 9 unknown men. Sarabhai operated with a quiet authority and a long-term vision that transcended political squabbles and immediate gains. He wasn't building weapons, he was building a technological infrastructure for upliftment. In the context of the Cold War space race, which was overwhelmingly driven by military and political rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, India's program under Sarabhai stood out as a third path, a model of how to harness the power of the heavens for earthly good. This is precisely the kind of balanced, ethical technological development that the society would ostensibly encourage. Sarabhai's ability to rapidly establish a sophisticated space agency in a newly independent and developing nation is a monumental achievement. One could argue it was the result of his brilliant leadership and the talent of his team, which it was. But the legend allows for the possibility that he also benefited from a deeper, older well of knowledge, perhaps even guidance from the keepers of the sixth book on gravitation or the eighth on light and communication, ensuring that this new spacefaring nation would emerge as a force for stability and peace in the world. The speculative links don't end there. What about the sudden, simultaneous, and independent development of calculus by Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz? This historical puzzle, often explained as a case of parallel invention, takes on a new dimension through the lens of the legend. Could it be that the principles of this advanced mathematics, potentially contained within one of the 9 books, were deemed ready for release into the wider scientific community? The society, operating through its decentralized network, might have subtly guided these two brilliant minds on opposite ends of Europe toward the same conclusions, effectively seeding a mathematical revolution that would be essential for the upcoming scientific and industrial ages. This method ensures that no single person or nation claims sole credit for a foundational discovery, preventing its weaponization as a national secret and instead releasing it as a common tool for all humanity. Similarly, the mysterious life of the alchemist and philosopher Sir Isaac Newton himself, who spent more time on esoteric biblical prophecy and alchemical studies than on the physics that made him famous, fits the profile of a mind grappling with fragments of a much larger, hidden knowledge system. His famous quote about standing on the shoulders of giants takes on a literal meaning if those giants were not just his scientific predecessors, but the anonymous, cumulative work of the 9 across the centuries. This exploration forces us to confront a profound and unsettling question about the nature of genius itself. Are these monumental figures, Da Vinci, Tesla, Sarabhai, proof that the human mind, in its rare, transcendent states, can independently leapfrog centuries of accumulated knowledge through sheer brilliance? Or does their work suggest a more complex interaction, where the most fertile and receptive minds become vessels for a wisdom that is being carefully curated and released by a hidden hand? The legend of the 9 unknown men does not necessarily diminish their achievements. Instead, it recontextualizes them. It proposes that genius might not be an isolated lightning strike, but rather the perfect receptor for a signal that has been broadcasting for millennia, a signal intended to guide humanity, step by cautious step, away from the abyss and toward a destiny it is not yet fully equipped to grasp on its own. The true power of the society may not lie in dictating our every move, but in the subtle art of inspiration, placing the right idea in the right mind at the right moment in history, allowing us to believe we discovered it all by ourselves. But what happens when this ancient legend of flying machines collides with documented history from the modern era? This brings us to one of the most electrifying and hotly debated chapters in the entire mystery, the story of Shivkar Talpade. In the bustling city of Bombay in the year 1895, 8 full years before the Wright Brothers' legendary flight at Kitty Hawk, Talpade, a Sanskrit scholar and a fervent nationalist, is said to have achieved the impossible. According to persistent reports and local testimonies from the time, he constructed and successfully launched an unmanned, heavier-than-air aircraft which he named Marutsaka, or Friend of the Wind. The most astounding part of this claim is not merely the early date, but the alleged source of his inspiration. Talpade was not working from the blueprints of contemporary pioneers like Lilienthal or Chanute. Instead, he is said to have drawn his designs directly from ancient Sanskrit texts, specifically the Vaimanika Shastra, an early 20th century text itself claiming to be based on far older sources and other Vedic scriptures that describe the construction and operation of Vimanas. For those who believe in the Nine Unknown Men, Talpade's story is not just a historical curiosity. It is potential, tangible proof of a hidden knowledge system leaking into the public sphere, a momentary flicker of the sixth book's power in the hands of a brilliant, if unprepared, individual. To understand the gravity of this claim, we need to picture the global technological landscape of 1895. The internal combustion engine was in its infancy, and the very concept of powered, controlled flight was considered by most Western scientists to be a fool's dream, the domain of eccentric tinkerers and mad inventors. The idea that a lone scholar in colonial India, using scripts written on palm leaves thousands of years old, could have unlocked the secret is staggering. Witnesses, including supposedly a prominent Indian judge and a large crowd of onlookers at Bombay's Chowpatty beach, described the Marutsaka as rising to an impressive height and flying for a considerable distance before landing safely. The propulsion system was the most mysterious element of all. It was not powered by a conventional engine, but was rumored to utilize a revolutionary and perplexing combination of mercury vapor and electrical energy, a description that sends a shiver down the spine of anyone familiar with the Vimana lore and its repeated references to mercury-based engines. Now, let's consider the source material that supposedly guided Talpade, the Vaimanika Shastra. This text, which translates to the science of aeronautics, was first committed to writing in the early 1900s, dictated by a mystic who claimed it was channeled from the ancient sage Bharadvaja. It contains incredibly detailed and often bizarre descriptions of various types of Vimanas, their construction, and their operational principles. The text speaks of them being built from specific, specially treated metals, of using energy from the sun and atmosphere, and of being equipped with weapons and devices for optical stealth. Mainstream scientists and historians have largely dismissed the Vaimanika Shastra as a pseudo-scientific fabrication, pointing out that many of its diagrams and descriptions are aerodynamically nonsensical and that its physics contradicts established principles. However, proponents of the Talpade story offer a crucial counter-argument. They suggest that the text we have today is a corrupted, misunderstood copy. The original knowledge, they argue, was not meant to be taken as literal, step-by-step mechanical instructions, but as an allegorical and symbolic representation of a technology so advanced that its true principles, perhaps involving the manipulation of gravitational fields or electromagnetic forces, were deliberately veiled in a language that would be incomprehensible to the uninitiated. Talpade, as a deep scholar of Sanskrit and Vedic science, might have possessed the unique key to interpreting these symbols, allowing him to construct a working, albeit primitive, model. This is where the thread leads directly back to the secret society of the Nine Unknown Men. If Talpade genuinely succeeded, the question becomes, how? Was he a solitary genius who independently cracked an ancient code, or was his breakthrough not entirely his own? The theory suggests that Talpade may have been a test case, a carefully selected individual who was given indirect access to a fragment of the knowledge contained within the sixth book. His mentor was the revered saint and Indian independence activist Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, and his spiritual guide was none other than Swami Vivekananda, two of the most formidable intellectual and spiritual figures of their time. Both men were deeply immersed in the synthesis of ancient Indian wisdom and modern scientific thought. It is conceivable that within their vast networks of esoteric knowledge, a sliver of the society's guarded information was passed along, not as a formal initiation, but as an inspired hint, a nudge to demonstrate the potency of India's own scientific heritage at a time when the nation was struggling under colonial rule. The flight of the Marutsaka, then, would have been a powerful symbolic act, a message that the ancient past held secrets that could rival and even surpass the technological might of the British Empire. So, what became of this miraculous machine and its creator? The aftermath of the alleged flight is as telling as the event itself. The story goes that Talpade sought funding from the colonial government to continue his research, but was met with ridicule and dismissal. British officials, steeped in a worldview that saw the colonized people as technologically backward, could not conceive of an Indian beating Western pioneers at their own game. The Marataka was reportedly confiscated and later dismantled, its secrets lost. Talpade, heartbroken and impoverished, was unable to replicate his success and died in obscurity. This tragic ending fits a classic pattern often associated with suppressed or inconvenient discoveries. The establishment, unable to fit a new paradigm into its existing framework, simply ignores or actively suppresses it. From the perspective of the 9 unknown men, the outcome might have been precisely according to plan. A public, successful demonstration of a Vimana-based aircraft in 1895 would have been catastrophically premature. It would have triggered a global arms race of unimaginable ferocity, with every world power scrambling to plunder Sanskrit texts to reverse engineer the technology, likely leading to the very kind of global domination and warfare Asoka feared. The Society's intervention, if it occurred, might have been to ensure the experiment remained just that, a single, unrepeatable demonstration that inspired a few, but was ultimately buried by the weight of colonial skepticism, thus keeping the genie safely in the bottle for a little while longer. The tale of Shivkar Talpade stands as a haunting and ambiguous monument at the crossroads of myth and history. It is a story that challenges the linear, Eurocentric narrative of technological progress. Whether viewed as a genuine historical event, a patriotic legend, or a fragment of a larger, hidden history, it forces a profound question. Could the key to humanity's future advancements be found not only by looking forward, but by recovering the lost sciences of our deep past? The silent, watchful custodians of the 6th book would undoubtedly argue that the answer is yes, but they would also caution that the timing of that recovery is everything. The brief, brilliant flight of the Marataka over a Bombay beach may have been a carefully calculated leak, a test to see if the world was ready. The fact that it was so thoroughly forgotten suggests that, in their judgment, we very clearly were not. While the legend of the 9 unknown men had been whispered in the temples and palm leaf libraries of India for centuries, it remained a secret of the East, completely unknown to the Western world. This all changed in the late 19th century, not through the work of an archaeologist or a scholar, but through the pen of a French author, a colonial judge named Louis Jacolliot. Stationed in French India during the 1860s and 70s, Jacolliot was an avid student of the region's culture, languages, and religious texts. He immersed himself in the study of Hinduism and Brahmanism, and he began publishing a series of books that aimed to translate and interpret these ancient philosophies for a European audience. It was in his 1869 work, The Bible in India, Hindu Origin of Hebrew and Christian Revelation, that he first recorded a remarkable claim. He wrote of a secret society founded by the Emperor Asoka, consisting of 9 unnamed scientists who were the guardians of all human knowledge, tasked with protecting it from misuse. This was the moment the legend crossed a cultural threshold, moving from an obscure Indian tradition into the burgeoning imagination of the West. Jacolliot's role, however, is layered with complexity. He was not a dispassionate historian presenting a dry, factual account. He was a man of his time, a colonial administrator who was simultaneously fascinated by and condescending towards the culture he was documenting. His writings often blurred the lines between his own scholarly observations, the stories told to him by Brahmin priests, and his personal philosophical speculations. He presented the legend of the 9 not as a verified historical fact, but as a powerful and persistent tradition he had encountered during his travels. For Jacolliot, this secret council served as a dramatic symbol of the profound, hidden wisdom he believed was embedded within Vedic philosophy, a wisdom he felt surpassed and predated the knowledge found in the Western biblical tradition. His primary goal was provocative, He aimed to challenge the Eurocentric view of history and religion by suggesting that the origins of many so-called Western truths could be traced back to the banks of the Ganges. The Nine Unknown Men, in his telling, became the ultimate custodians of this primordial knowledge. The impact of Jacolliot's work was electric, but not in the way he might have initially expected. It was not mainstream academia that seized upon his account, but a very different and rapidly growing intellectual subculture, the European occult revival. In the smoky salons of Paris and London, a generation of writers and mystics, disillusioned with rigid materialism and orthodox religion, were hungrily seeking ancient secrets and alternative spiritualities. Figures like Helena Blavatsky, the charismatic co-founder of the Theosophical Society, devoured Jacolliot's books. For them, his mention of the Nine was not just a curious anecdote, it was a vital piece of evidence. It provided a historical and geographical anchor for their own beliefs in a hidden brotherhood of perfected masters, enlightened beings who secretly guided humanity's spiritual evolution from a hidden location, often thought to be in Tibet or the Himalayas. Jacolliot's 9 scientists were seamlessly woven into the theosophical doctrine, transforming from guardians of physical science into ascended masters of occult wisdom, their 9 books becoming repositories of esoteric, not just empirical, knowledge. This theosophical adoption was the crucial catalyst that launched the legend into the realm of modern conspiracy theory. Once the 9 were embedded in this esoteric framework, their story took on a life of its own, mutating and expanding with each retelling. The writer Talbot Mundy, a British colonial policeman turned author of adventure novels, took the next definitive step. In his 1923 novel, The Nine Unknown, he didn't just reference the society, he fleshed them out, giving them a thrilling, global narrative. Mundy transformed Jacolliot's vague guardians into a powerful, active organization working behind the scenes of world events, battling other secret societies to steer the course of history. His fictional portrayal was so compelling and detailed that it became, for many readers, the primary source of the myth. The line between Jacolliot's reported tradition and Mundy's entertaining fiction became irrevocably blurred, and the 9 unknown men were reborn as archetypal characters in a global shadow play. The journey of this idea, from Jacolliot's scholarly travelogue to Mundy's pulp fiction, reveals a fascinating pattern in how such legends are born and sustained. A Western observer, immersed in a foreign culture, encounters a local tradition and records it through his own interpretive lens, often projecting his own philosophical desires onto it. This recorded account is then discovered by a counter-cultural movement, like the occultists, who reshape it to fit their own pre-existing narrative of hidden truths and secret hierarchies. Finally, a popular author dramatizes and sensationalizes the concept, turning it into a compelling story that captures the public imagination. At each stage, the original kernel of the legend is embellished, adapted, and reinvented, its details becoming more concrete and its scope more grandiose, until the fictionalized version becomes more well-known than the original reported tradition. Jacolliot did not invent the 9 unknown men, but he provided the spark. The tinder was the Western world's endless fascination with the mystic East, and the resulting fire was a modern mythos that continues to burn brightly, fueling speculation and wonder to this day. The legend, having been transplanted from Indian tradition into the Western esoteric imagination by Louis Jacolliot, now needed a storyteller to give it a pulse, a face, and a global stage. That storyteller arrived in the form of a former British colonial policeman turned swashbuckling author named Talbot Mundy. In 1923, Mundy published his seminal adventure novel, The Nine Unknown, and in doing so, he performed a kind of literary alchemy. He took Jacolliot's scholarly footnote and the Theosophist's mystical framework and forged them into a thrilling, breathless narrative that would forever define the public's perception of this secret society. Mundy didn't just write about the 9, he unleashed them onto the world as charismatic, active players in a grand, global chess game. His genius lay in his ability to weave their ancient, static purpose into the fabric of contemporary early 20th century pulp adventure, creating a template so compelling that it became indistinguishable from reality for countless readers. Mundy's own life provided the perfect raw material for such a tale. He had traveled extensively throughout India and Africa, working for the British colonial service before turning to writing. This first-hand experience lent his stories an air of gritty authenticity. He knew the landscapes, the cultures, and the complex political tensions of the British Empire intimately. When he wrote about secret societies manipulating events from the shadows of Calcutta or the Himalayas, it felt plausible because he had been in those shadows himself. His fictional nine were not reclusive monks guarding dusty tomes in a forgotten cave. They were a dynamic, resourceful, and fiercely dedicated organization, a mixture of brilliant scientists, master strategists, and rugged men of action. They had vast financial resources, a global network of agents, and they were locked in a perpetual, secret war against other, more malevolent secret societies that sought to misuse the ancient knowledge for world domination. Mundy essentially created the blueprint for the modern conspiracy thriller, casting the Nine as the original, benevolent proto-James Bond agency, fighting a hidden war to save humanity from itself. The specific narrative of his novel is a masterclass in blurring the lines between fact and fiction. The plot centers on a British soldier and his companions who stumble upon the society and are drawn into a desperate race to prevent a sinister cult from stealing one of the 9 books, specifically the one on propaganda. Mundy Vidly Chinese letter, the books not as abstract concepts, but as tangible, dangerously powerful objects. He described the techniques within the first book being used to incite riots and manipulate entire populations, giving the ancient legend a terrifying, immediate relevance to a world still reeling from the trauma of the First World War and the rise of mass media. By placing his characters in direct conflict over these books, Mundy made the legend feel urgent and real. Readers weren't just learning about a myth, they were experiencing a fictionalized version of what it might be like to encounter the society, making the idea far more visceral and memorable than any scholarly account could ever be. This fictional portrayal had a profound and irreversible effect. Before Mundy, the 9 unknown men were an obscure, albeit fascinating, historical or esoteric curiosity. After the 9 unknown became a hit, they were reborn in the public consciousness as a globe-spanning, all-powerful cabal. Mundy provided the specific details that the legend previously lacked: the organizational structure, the methods of operation, the moral dilemmas of wielding such power. He gave the society a personality. His work acted as a powerful filter for generations of new enthusiasts. Their first and most formative encounter with the legend was through his thrilling novel, not through Jacolliot's dry reports or the complex symbolism of theosophy. The fictional template became the default setting, and any subsequent investigation into the real society would forever be measured against the dramatic, adventure-packed world Mundy had created. The ripple effects of this pop culture explosion are visible everywhere in the 20th and 21st centuries. One can draw a direct line from Talbot Mundy's The 9 Unknown to a show like The X-Files, with its shadowy syndicate manipulating human history and suppressing extraterrestrial truth. The concept of a secret council of wise men guiding humanity is a central pillar of the Indiana Jones franchise, where ancient artifacts hold world-altering power. Even modern video games and graphic novels are filled with archetypes that mirror Mundy's vision: the hidden order with ancient roots, the race for forbidden knowledge, the lone hero uncovering a truth too big for the world to handle. Mundy essentially created a narrative virus, a meme that embedded itself deep within our collective storytelling DNA. He proved that the legend of the 9 was a perfectly adaptable framework, a skeleton upon which any number of thrilling, paranoid, or hopeful stories could be built. This blurring of lines, however, creates a significant challenge for anyone trying to separate historical possibility from fictional entertainment. Mundy's work is so engaging and internally consistent that it's easy to forget it is a work of fiction. The very details that make his story compelling, the specific conflicts, the characterizations, the globe-trotting adventures, are the very things that have no basis in the original legend. This has led to a common phenomenon where people will cite Mundy's novel as evidence for the society's existence, his dramatic plot points having been misremembered as historical facts passed down through time. The powerful, active cabal of his imagination has, for many, replaced the more nuanced and elusive concept of a decentralized, anonymous network of guardians. The legend gained immense popularity, but at the cost of its original subtlety, becoming in the public mind something closer to a superhero story than a philosophical proposition about the ethical custody of knowledge. Yet, to dismiss Mundy's contribution as mere fabrication would be to miss its deeper significance. His novel, and the pop culture explosion it ignited, serves a purpose that aligns, ironically, with the society's alleged mission. These stories, in their own way, act as a modern form of mythology. They keep the core idea alive in the cultural bloodstream, the idea that knowledge is a double-edged sword, that power requires responsibility, and that there might be unseen forces working to prevent our self-destruction. Even if these modern tales are fictional, they engage the public in a crucial conversation about the very issues that supposedly motivated Emperor Asoka. They make us question the official narrative, consider the unintended consequences of technology, and wonder about the hidden currents of history. Talbot Mundy may have cemented a fictionalized version of the Nine Unknown Men, but in doing so, he gave a 2,000-year-old warning from an Indian emperor of vibrant, compelling, and endlessly adaptable new life, ensuring that the legend would continue to captivate and challenge us for generations to come. The shadowy narrative of the Nine Unknown Men inevitably draws us toward the most catastrophic conflict in human history, a period that would seem to demand their intervention if they truly existed. The Second World War represented the exact scenario Asoka feared, a global conflagration where advanced scientific knowledge was being weaponized at an unprecedented scale, pushing humanity to the very brink of self-annihilation. It is here that the legend grows its most tantalizing and controversial limbs, suggesting the society did not merely observe, but actively shape the outcome from behind the veil of total war. Unverified accounts and persistent whispers point to the sudden, almost miraculous scientific leaps made by the Allies as potential evidence of outside help. The most famous of these leaps was, of course, the Manhattan Project, which produced the atomic bomb. The physics behind this weapon, nuclear fission, was a concept that had been slowly coalescing in the minds of physicists like Einstein, Fermi, and Oppenheimer. Yet, the sheer, breakneck speed with which the theoretical was transformed into a functional, city-leveling weapon in just a few years has long been a source of awe and unease. Could the foundational equations and engineering principles have been subtly supplemented? If the fourth book on alchemy truly contained the secrets of matter and energy, its custodians would have understood nuclear physics in its entirety. Their intervention wouldn't have been about handing over blueprints, but about ensuring that key researchers had crucial eureka moments at critical junctures, or that certain technical dead ends were avoided, accelerating the process just enough to ensure the Allies achieved a definitive result before the Axis powers could. This speculation extends far beyond the atomic bomb into other, less publicized but equally revolutionary technologies. Consider the development of radar, which gave the Royal Air Force a decisive edge during the Battle of Britain. Or the mass production of penicillin, which saved countless lives. Even the sophisticated code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park, which relied on early computational machines to crack the German Enigma code, fit a curious pattern. These were all fields of knowledge that aligned directly with the purported contents of the 9 books, the manipulation of energy and light from the 8th book, the mastery of microbiology from the 3rd, and the principles of communication and information theory from the 5th. The simultaneous and rapid maturation of these disparate technologies across the Allied nations could be interpreted as the coordinated, behind-the-scenes work of a network that understood these sciences at their root. Their goal would not have been to grant an easy victory, but to provide just enough of an advantage to tip the scales against a regime whose victory would have meant a global dark age of tyranny and the systematic suppression of human freedom, an outcome utterly antithetical to the society's mission of fostering long-term stability. The most chilling thread in this tapestry of speculation involves not what the Allies gained, but what the Nazis were allegedly prevented from acquiring. The rumors of advanced German Wunderwaffe or wonder weapons are well documented, from the V-2 rockets that terrorized London to nascent jet aircraft. But the more esoteric Nazi research projects plunge directly into the realm of the legend. Figures like SS officers Otto Skorzeny and Karl Horshofer were deeply involved in expeditions to Tibet and the Himalayas, ostensibly seeking the origins of the Aryan race. Conspiracy theorists, however, suggest a different objective. They were searching for the hidden headquarters of the 9 unknown men themselves, or at least for fragments of their knowledge. The Nazi obsession with the occult and ancient mysteries is a historical fact. Is it so far-fetched to imagine that their intelligence services, having stumbled upon the same legends that Louis Jacolliot recorded, would have mounted a serious effort to find and seize this ultimate source of power? If the society was real, their primary objective in the war would have been to ensure this never happened. Their methods would have been those of misdirection and sabotage. An archaeological dig in the mountains mysteriously loses its funding. A key researcher defects with faulty data. A shipment of rare minerals needed for an experiment is lost at sea. These would be untraceable actions, the silent, defensive maneuvers of a guardian protecting its most sacred trust from the ultimate threat of a genocidal regime armed with godlike technology. This line of thinking forces us to confront the immense moral weight such interventions would carry. If the society possessed the knowledge to end the war quickly, perhaps even without the Holocaust and the vaporization of entire cities, why allow such horrors to unfold? This is the central, agonizing paradox of their alleged role. From their perspective, operating on a timeline of centuries, their goal is not to eliminate all human suffering, but to prevent total extinction. A sudden, miraculous Allied victory achieved through incomprehensible technology might have prevented the immediate horrors of the war, but it would have created a far more dangerous world afterward. The victorious powers, now aware of such power, would have plunged into a frantic, paranoid scramble to discover its source, likely leading to an even more destructive and secretive global arms race. The calculated, bloody slog of a conventional war, for all its tragedy, allowed for a geopolitical resolution that, through the creation of the United Nations and a fragile balance of power, prevented a third world war for decades. The society's inaction in the face of specific atrocities, therefore, might be seen not as callousness but as the application of a devastatingly cold calculus: accept a known, contained catastrophe to avert an unimaginable terminal one. Their silence during the Holocaust would be the most difficult aspect of their legacy to reconcile, suggesting that their definition of protecting humanity is concerned with the survival of the species as a whole, even if it means allowing the destruction of millions of its individual members. When we pull back from these specific claims and examine the broader philosophical role the Nine would have played, their potential involvement in the war positions them not as saviors, but as silent arbiters of a necessary balance. They would have been the unseen force ensuring that no single, irredeemably malevolent power could achieve a final victory, while also preventing the victorious side from emerging with such overwhelming technological superiority that it could impose a permanent, stagnant hegemony on the rest of the world. The post-war world order, for all its flaws, was a multipolar one characterized by a Cold War standoff between two superpowers. This tense equilibrium, ironically, may have been the ideal outcome from the society's long-term perspective. It forced a kind of cautious innovation and created a deterrent against all-out war, all while allowing scientific and cultural progress to continue across the globe. The Nine Unknown Men, if they were there, would not have been fighting for the Allies or the Axis. They would have been fighting for the future itself, carefully pruning the branches of history to ensure that humanity, though scarred and shaken, would live to see another day, its potential for both destruction and enlightenment still intact, its destiny still its own to seize. What makes the legend of the Nine Unknown Men so perennially fascinating is not just its audacious historical claims, but the uncanny way its narrative seems to prefigure the very frontiers of our own scientific exploration. It is as if we are living in an age of echoes, where our most cutting-edge discoveries in the 21st century resonate with the descriptions of knowledge that was supposedly sealed away millennia ago. Consider the third book, dedicated to microbiology and biotechnology. For centuries, the idea that ancient masters understood germ theory and genetic manipulation seemed utterly fantastical. Yet, step into any modern genetics lab today, and you will find scientists using a tool called CRISPR-Cas9, a technology that allows for the precise editing of DNA, literally rewriting the code of life. This is not just a vague parallel, it is the functional realization of the power described in the third book, the ability to engineer biological entities, to correct hereditary diseases, and to potentially create designer pathogens. We are now grappling with the very ethical dilemmas that the legend suggests prompted Asoka to hide this knowledge. The power to cure any disease walks hand in hand with the power to create one. Our current, frantic global debates about the morality of germline editing and the security of gain-of-function research are a public enactment of the private, centuries-long vigil the society would have maintained over this terrifying and wonderful domain. This echo grows even louder when we turn to the fifth book, the one concerning communication. Its alleged contents described protocols for universal communication, including contact with non-human intelligence. For most of history, this was the stuff of pure speculation. But today, the field of quantum communication is making staggering advances. Scientists are now using the bizarre principles of quantum entanglement, where two particles remain connected across vast distances, such that the state of one instantly influences the other, to create theoretically unhackable communication networks. This isn't just a faster way to send a text message. It represents a fundamental shift in how information itself can be transmitted, potentially operating on a principle that is entirely secure and transcends classical physics. Furthermore, our search for extraterrestrial intelligence has evolved beyond simply listening for radio waves. Projects like Breakthrough Listen are now also considering whether advanced civilizations might use neutrino beams or gravitational waves for communication modalities that are far more efficient for interstellar distances. We are, in effect, slowly and painstakingly building the conceptual framework for the universal language of physics that the fifth book would have contained. A language based not on words, but on the immutable constants of the cosmos. Then we have the seventh book on cosmogony, which was said to contain a complete model of the universe's origin and structure. For generations, this was confined to the realm of philosophy and mythology. Now our powerful telescopes, like the James Webb Space Telescope, are not only confirming the broad strokes of the Big Bang Theory, but are also peering back into the cosmic dawn, observing the formation of the first galaxies. More profoundly, we have confirmed the existence of exoplanets' worlds orbiting other stars, in numbers that stagger the imagination, with thousands already discovered and billions estimated to exist in our galaxy alone. We are systematically cataloging the cosmic neighborhood, moving from a model of a unique solar system to one of a universe teeming with potential worlds. This empirical mapping of the heavens is a direct, real-world parallel to the cosmic knowledge the seventh book was said to encapsulate. We are constructing, piece by piece, the very atlas of creation that the Society's custodians might have been updating in secret for 2,000 years. Perhaps the most immediate and unsettling parallel exists in the domain of the first and ninth books, those dealing with propaganda and sociology. The first book's mastery of mass psychology finds its modern counterpart in the intricate science of social network analysis and the algorithmic curation of our digital lives. Tech companies employ armies of data scientists who map our social connections, our likes, our fears, and our consumption habits with a precision that would have been the envy of any ancient propagandist. These algorithms don't just show us content, they shape our perceived reality, creating filter bubbles and echo chambers that can radicalize populations and sway elections. This is the applied science of mass influence, operating at a scale and speed previously unimaginable. It is the practical, if often clumsy, application of the principles that the first book was designed to contain and control. Simultaneously, the ninth book's grand unified theory of civilization is being actively pursued through the emerging field of cleodynamics, the application of mathematical modeling to history. Researchers are now using vast datasets from historical records to identify the recurring cycles that lead to the rise and fall of empires, analyzing factors like wealth inequality, political polarization, and societal resilience. They are building quantitative models that can, in some cases, predict periods of instability. This is no longer just the philosophical speculation of a historian like Toynbee. It is a hard data-driven attempt to uncover the fundamental equations of human society. The custodians of the ninth book would have been the ultimate cleodynamicians, their models refined over centuries of silent observation. Our own fledgling efforts in this field represent a nascent collective attempt to gain the kind of foresight that the legend attributes to this hidden council, to see the patterns in the chaos of human affairs and perhaps one day learn to navigate them consciously. This cascade of parallels forces a profound and humbling conclusion. The staggering scientific progress of the last century, which we so proudly regard as the pinnacle of human achievement, begins to look less like a linear ascent and more like a process of collective remembering. It appears as though we are independently and often laboriously rediscovering a scientific and technological continent whose map was drawn long ago. The 9 books of the unknown men serve as a prophetic index of human potential, a table of contents for the great library of knowledge we are only now beginning to enter. This does not diminish our accomplishments, but it does reframe them. It suggests that the most profound breakthroughs are not inventions, but discoveries, the uncovering of laws and possibilities that have always existed, waiting for a civilization to mature enough to find them and, hopefully, to wield them with the wisdom that has so far, according to the legend, been our most elusive discovery of all. Yet, if the influence of the 9 unknown men extends into our modern technological landscape, one of the most compelling and enigmatic theaters for their potential activity is not the ancient East, but modern Europe, with France emerging as a particularly vibrant hub of unexplained technological anomalies. This might seem counterintuitive, but it aligns perfectly with the legend's depiction of a decentralized global network. Europe's deep history of secret societies, from the Rosicrucians to speculative Freemasonry, and its position at the forefront of scientific research, makes it a plausible stage for the Society's contemporary operations, a place where fragments of their guarded knowledge might occasionally and accidentally surface. The most startling and well-documented cluster of these anomalies centers on a series of encounters involving advanced aircraft, events that defy conventional explanation and point toward a technology that seems to leapfrog our own by generations. At the heart of this mystery is an incident that has become legendary within aviation and UFO research circles, one that carries a name straight out of ancient lore: the Suvarnabhumi airplane. The event unfolded in the skies over France on a clear night in November 1990. Japan Airlines Flight 162, a cargo plane, was on a routine flight from Paris to Tokyo when its experienced crew witnessed something that would challenge their understanding of reality. Without any warning, their radar picked up an enormous, unidentified object closing in on them at an incredible speed. As it drew nearer, the crew described seeing a craft of staggering proportions, easily several times the size of their own jumbo jet. Its shape was not aerodynamic in any conventional sense. It was described as a vast, silent, triangular or diamond-shaped behemoth, outlined by a constellation of bright, pulsating lights. The most baffling aspect was its propulsion or lack thereof. It moved with a slow, deliberate, and utterly silent grace that defied the known principles of jet or rocket engines, executing maneuvers that would generate gravitational forces capable of tearing any known human-made aircraft apart. What makes the Suvarnabhumi sighting so uniquely compelling is not just the visual account, but the electronic evidence. The object was tracked simultaneously on the aircraft's own weather radar and by military ground control, confirming it was a solid, physical object and not a meteorological phenomenon or a collective hallucination. For several tense minutes, this silent giant paced the commercial airliner, a silent sentinel in the night sky, before accelerating away at a speed that was, by all accounts, instantaneous, vanishing from both visual and electronic scopes in the blink of an eye. The official investigation by the French Aviation Authority, while stopping short of an extraterrestrial explanation, officially classified the incident as unknown. The name Suvarnabhumi itself, which means golden land in Sanskrit and is an ancient name for a mythical continent, was reportedly used by one of the investigators, creating a direct and tantalizing linguistic bridge back. Very cultural cradle of the Nine Unknown Men legend. This was not an isolated event. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, France experienced a dramatic wave of similar sightings, now famously known as the French UFO wave. What set this wave apart was the consistent description of the objects witnessed. They were not the classic flying saucers of American pop culture, but large, low-flying, silent triangular craft, often black and without any visible seams, windows, or propulsion systems. They were frequently reported hovering over rural areas and even flying at low altitudes over major cities, witnessed by thousands of people including police officers, pilots, and military personnel. The sheer volume and credibility of these reports prompted the French government to take the phenomenon seriously, leading to the establishment of JAPAN, a dedicated office within the National Space Agency, CNES, tasked with scientifically investigating these unidentified aerospace phenomena. The existence of an official, state-run agency to study these occurrences is unique in the world and underscores the seriousness with which the French establishment has treated these technological mysteries. When we attempt to fit these advanced craft into the framework of the Nine Unknown Men, a fascinating and speculative narrative emerges. The descriptions of silent, triangular vehicles capable of instantaneous acceleration and gravity-defying maneuvers align almost perfectly with the alleged contents of the sixth book, the one dedicated to the secrets of gravitation and the fabled Vimanas. The technology displayed is precisely what one would expect from a civilization that had mastered the manipulation of gravitational fields, creating local bubbles that negate inertia and mass. The fact that these objects are consistently silent suggests a form of propulsion that does not rely on burning fuel and expelling gases, but on manipulating the very fabric of space-time itself. If the society is real and is actively testing or deploying such craft, the skies of Europe, with their dense air traffic and advanced tracking systems, would be an ideal, if brazen, real-world laboratory to monitor how close human technology is to detecting and understanding their capabilities. The European connection deepens when we consider the region's role in cutting-edge scientific research, particularly the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, nestled on the Franco-Swiss border. CERN represents humanity's most ambitious attempt to unlock the fundamental secrets of the universe, smashing particles together to discover the basic building blocks of matter. This is the modern world's most powerful alchemical furnace, a direct pursuit of the knowledge potentially contained within the Society's fourth and seventh books. Could the increased sightings of anomalous craft in this region be more than a coincidence? One provocative theory suggests they are not intrusions but observations. A society tasked with safeguarding ultimate knowledge would undoubtedly take a keen interest in the moment humanity begins to experimentally probe the origins of the cosmos and the nature of reality. Their presence could be that of a watchful custodian, ensuring that our experiments do not inadvertently stumble into a realm of physics so dangerous that it could destabilize the planet or even the local fabric of space-time, a possibility that some physicists have grimly joked about. The silent triangular craft, then, are not alien visitors, but the advanced monitoring systems of the ultimate guardians, a manifestation of the very oversight Emperor Asoka envisioned, keeping a silent vigil as we play with the deepest fires of creation. This perspective transforms the Suvarnabhumi incident from a mere close encounter into a potential moment of contact between our fledgling scientific civilization and the ancient, hidden intelligence that has been shepherding it all along. But after immersing ourselves in this captivating web of ancient astronauts, secret books, and hidden masters, we must now shift our perspective and turn a more critical, analytical eye toward the legend. The story of the 9 unknown men is a magnificent tapestry, but when we pull on its threads, the entire fabric begins to unravel under the weight of its own implausibility. The most glaring issue is the one that sinks most grand historical conspiracies, a complete and total absence of physical evidence. After allegedly operating for more than 2,000 years, this society has left behind not a single scrap of verifiable proof. There are no hidden vaults containing the 9 books, no carbon-dated manuscripts, no meeting minutes, no personal journals from any of the supposed members, and no archaeological finds that point to their existence. For an organization said to be guiding all of human civilization, its material footprint is zero. This is not merely an argument from silence, it is a deafening silence that spans continents and centuries. Compare this to other secretive groups like the Roman Collegium or medieval guilds. While their inner workings were private, their existence, membership, and activities are well documented in civic records, correspondence, and physical artifacts. The 9 unknown men, in stark contrast, are ghosts, leaving no trace in the very historical record they are said to have shaped. The legend's origin story itself collapses under historical scrutiny. The entire narrative hinges on the transformative experience of Emperor Asoka after the Kalinga War. While Ashoka's remorse and subsequent turn to Buddhism are firmly established in his own rock and pillar edicts, there is not a single mention, not one, of him founding a secret society of scientists. His edicts are remarkably detailed, outlining his philosophical principles, his public works, and his administrative policies. For a man so eager to broadcast his new ethical code to his entire empire, the creation of a perpetual, world-altering secret council would be the one project he would logically omit. Furthermore, the concept of compartmentalized scientific fields, propaganda, physiology, alchemy is a distinctly modern, post-Enlightenment categorization of knowledge. The intellectual landscape of Ashoka's India in the 3rd century before the Common Era was far more holistic and integrated with philosophy and spirituality. The idea that he would silo knowledge into 9 specific anachronistic books feels less like an ancient plan and more like a 19th or 20th century mind projecting its own understanding of science onto the past. This brings us to the crucial role of storytelling and narrative in the creation of modern myths. The legend of the 9 unknown men is a textbook example of a phenomenon scholars call retrospective causation, where later individuals look back at history and impose a pattern of order and intention onto what was, in reality, a chaotic and unplanned sequence of events. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine, and we are deeply uncomfortable with randomness and coincidence. When we see a brilliant mind like Leonardo da Vinci or Nikola Tesla, or a sudden technological leap, our instinct is to ask why. And how. The idea that they were just singular, inexplicable geniuses or that progress sometimes happens in unpredictable bursts is unsatisfying. A far more compelling answer is that a hidden, intelligent force was guiding them. This provides a comforting sense of order and purpose to history, suggesting that someone is in control, protecting us from our own follies. The myth of the 9 unknown men is at its heart a profound expression of a wish for a benevolent, parental oversight in a universe that often feels chaotic and indifferent. The journey of the legend from an obscure Indian tradition to a global conspiracy theory perfectly illustrates how such myths are manufactured and amplified. It began with Louis Jacolliot, a colonial writer who was not a dispassionate historian but a man with an agenda to prove the superiority of Eastern wisdom over Western religion. He recorded a local tradition, but he did so through his own interpretive lens, likely embellishing and shaping it to serve his philosophical argument. This seed was then planted in the fertile soil of the European occult revival. Theosophists like Helena Blavatsky were actively searching for evidence of a hidden brotherhood of masters to validate their own spiritual doctrines. They took Jacolliot's account and assimilated it, transforming the 9 scientists into ascended spiritual adepts. Finally, Talbot Mundy, a masterful writer of pulp fiction, took this esoteric concept and gave it a thrilling, global narrative in his novel, The 9 Unknown. His book was so engaging and vividly detailed that its fictional elements, the specific conflicts, the global network, the active interventions, began to be mistaken for historical fact by later enthusiasts. The legend we grapple with today is not an ancient one. It is a layered confection of colonial reportage, occult adaptation, and popular fiction, each layer adding new details and cementing its place in the modern imagination. Furthermore, many of the specific proofs offered by proponents of the legend disintegrate upon closer inspection. The story of Shivkar Talpade's flight, for instance, relies entirely on anecdotal accounts and local newspaper reports from a time of fervent Indian nationalism, when there was a powerful cultural and political incentive to claim technological precedence over the West. No physical evidence of the Marataka aircraft survives, and its alleged mercury-based propulsion system remains in the realm of speculative fantasy, never reproduced or verified. Similarly, the Vimana Shastra, the text he supposedly used, has been thoroughly analyzed by aeronautical engineers and historians who have unanimously declared its diagrams aerodynamically impossible and its physics nonsensical. What we are often left with is a pattern of confirmation bias, where believers point to isolated historical mysteries like Pope Sylvester II's advanced knowledge or the French UFO wave, and simply assert a connection to the 9 without any causal evidence. The absence of a conventional explanation is used to fill the void with a preferred, extraordinary one, a classic logical fallacy. Ultimately, the enduring power of the 9 unknown men speaks less to historical truth and more to a deep, recurring human archetype. We see this same pattern in the myth of Atlantis, the legend of King Arthur's eventual return, and even in modern science fiction like The Matrix or Star Wars. It is the story of the hidden guardians, the keepers of lost wisdom, the hope that a chosen few are watching over us. This archetype fulfills a profound psychological need. It comforts our fear of existential chaos and our anxiety about the terrifying power of our own technology. In a world facing climate change, pandemics, and the potential for nuclear war, the idea that a benevolent, hyper-intelligent council is subtly managing these risks in the background is an incredibly seductive thought. It allows us to believe that someone has a plan, that the dizzying complexity of global civilization is not hurtling toward an inevitable abyss, but is instead being gently steered by a wisdom far greater than our own. The Nine Unknown Men are not a historical reality, but they are a powerful cultural and psychological reality, a myth for the modern age that gives tangible form to our deepest hopes and our most profound fears about the future we are creating. So after sifting through all the historical claims and speculative connections, we are left with a final, and perhaps the most important, question. Forget for a moment whether the Nine Unknown Men are real. Why does their story feel so true? Why has this specific legend, out of countless others, captured imaginations for over a century and refused to let go? The answer lies not in ancient libraries, but in the deep, hidden chambers of the human psyche. This legend endures because it is a perfect, almost divine, narrative antidote to the most profound anxieties of the modern age. In a world that feels increasingly chaotic, complex, and perilous, the idea of a benevolent, secretive council offers a powerful and comforting form of psychological solace. It tells us that the terrifying power we now wield, the power to edit genes, to ignite artificial intelligence, to destabilize the global climate, is not, in fact, entirely in our own clumsy, untrustworthy hands. It suggests that a wiser, older intelligence is managing the most dangerous variables, providing a hidden safety net for a species that is, by all appearances, racing toward a cliff. This taps directly into a universal archetype that mythologist Joseph Campbell would recognize instantly: the wise old men, the hidden council, the guardians of the sacred trust. We see this pattern everywhere, from King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table and the mystical druids of Celtic lore to the Jedi Council in Star Wars and the benevolent overseers in films like The Adjustment Bureau. These stories are not random. They are recurring solutions to a recurring human problem, the problem of fallible leadership and the fear of chaos. When our visible leaders so often appear short-sighted, corrupt, or incompetent, the human mind naturally seeks a higher authority, a hidden tier of leadership that operates beyond the messy fray of politics and ego. The Nine Unknown Men are the ultimate expression of this archetype. They are not politicians, they are philosophers, scientists. They are not motivated by wealth or fame, but by a sacred, eternal duty. They represent a fantasy of pure, uncorrupted expertise, a fantasy that becomes more seductive with every passing news cycle that highlights humanity's apparent inability to govern itself wisely. This legend also provides a crucial narrative framework for making sense of the bewildering pace of technological change. Think about the last 20 years. The internet has rewired global society. Smartphones have put a supercomputer in every pocket. Artificial intelligence is now writing, painting, and coding. From a ground-level view, this progress feels explosive, disorienting, and utterly unpredictable. It can seem like we are hurtling into the future with no map and no brakes. The story of the Nine Unknown Men offers a different, more orderly explanation. It suggests that this rapid, simultaneous advancement across multiple fields of science is not a chaotic accident, but the result of a controlled, deliberate process. Perhaps these leaps are not discoveries, but carefully timed releases. The legend reframes our vertigo not as a symptom of chaos, but as the planned curriculum of a hidden teacher, guiding us through our technological adolescence with a gentle, if invisible, hand. It transforms our anxiety about the unknown into a sense of being part of a structured, if secret, educational journey. At its core, this narrative speaks to our deepest hope that someone wise is ultimately in control. This is a profoundly human longing, a desire for a parental figure on a civilizational scale. We see this in childhood, where the belief that our parents have everything under control provides a fundamental sense of security. As adults faced with existential threats like nuclear war, pandemic disease, or environmental collapse, that childhood need can re-emerge in a new form. The idea of the Nine provides a psychological coping mechanism. It allows us to contemplate existential risks without succumbing to total despair. If a secret society is managing the big picture, then our individual and collective mistakes, no matter how catastrophic they seem, are not necessarily final. There is a backstop, there is a plan. This isn't about abdicating responsibility. It's about the emotional comfort of believing that our fumbling efforts are being monitored and, when necessary, corrected by a wisdom that transcends our own limited perspective. Ultimately, the legend of the Nine Unknown Men is a mirror. It reflects our collective anxieties about our own power and our desperate hope for a wiser future. It is a story we tell ourselves to navigate the gap between the staggering capabilities of our technology and the lingering immaturity of our moral and social development. The tale assures us that the most dangerous tools are locked in a vault, and the key is held not by a politician or a general, but by the best of us, the brilliant, the ethical, the long-view thinkers. Whether they exist in reality is almost beside the point. Their enduring power lies in the fact that they exist where it matters most, in our imagination, as a symbol of the wisdom we hope to one day achieve, and as a comforting, fictional scaffold supporting us as we build a real-world future that is more uncertain and more full of promise than any legend could possibly contain. From the shadowy corridors of history, the legend of the Nine Unknown Men has made a dramatic leap onto the brightly lit pages of comics and graphic novels, finding one of its most iconic portrayals in the beloved series The Adventures of Tintin. In the story Sagas of the Pharaoh, the young reporter Tintin stumbles upon a secret society that bears a striking resemblance to the ancient order. While Hergé, the creator, never explicitly names the Nine, the parallels are unmistakable. The society Tintin encounters is an ancient, clandestine group operating from a hidden base, its members possessing advanced knowledge and technology that they use to manipulate global events from behind the scenes. This was a brilliant act of narrative adaptation. Hergé took the core concept of a benevolent, secretive cabal and repackaged it within the thrilling, accessible framework of a globe-trotting adventure for young readers. He distilled the complex philosophical underpinnings of the legend into a tangible antagonist for his hero, transforming abstract guardians into a shadowy organization with traps, secret formulas, and a sprawling network of agents. This introduction to the concept for millions of readers ensured that the idea of a hidden hand guiding history was no longer confined to esoteric texts, but became a staple of modern adventure storytelling. Another seminal reinterpretation arrived with Alan Moore's groundbreaking graphic novel The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Moore, a master of literary alchemy, took the concept and plunged it into a darker, more complex universe. In his narrative, the Nine Unknown Men are presented as a far more ambiguous and powerful force. They are not merely guardians but active and sometimes ruthless engineers of reality. Moore reimagines them as the architects behind many of the fictional and historical events of the 19th and 20th centuries, weaving them into the fabric of a world populated by characters from other classic stories. This portrayal adds a profound new layer of cynicism and grandeur to the myth. In Moore's hands, the society is not just preventing catastrophe, they are actively curating human history, making cold, calculated decisions that sacrifice individual lives for what they perceive as the greater good of the species. This shift reflects a changing public consciousness, moving from the clear-cut heroes and villains of Tintin's era to a more morally grey world, where even the protectors might be capable of terrifying acts, forcing readers to question whether such oversight is a blessing or a new form of tyranny. The legend's migration into the interactive realm of video games has allowed for an even more personal and immersive exploration of its themes. Games like the Tomb Raider series and the Uncharted franchise often feature protagonists who uncover ancient, powerful secrets left behind by lost civilizations or secret societies. While not always named directly, the archetype is consistently present. a group of ancient masters who possessed knowledge that could reshape the world and who chose to hide it away to prevent its misuse. The interactive nature of gaming transforms the audience from passive observers into active participants in the mystery. Players don't just watch Lara Croft or Nathan Drake piece together the puzzle. They actively control the exploration, solve the cryptic clues, and ultimately confront the dilemma of what to do with the awesome power they discover. This medium powerfully reinforces the central question of the original legend. What happens when this hidden knowledge is found by someone who is not part of the chosen lineage? The game becomes a test of the player's own ethics, mirroring the society's ancient fear and placing the responsibility for the world's fate directly in the user's hands. Contemporary novels have further expanded the mythos, often using the framework of the Nine to explore cutting-edge scientific and philosophical concerns. Authors like James Rowlands and Steve Berry have built best-selling careers on thrillers that weave the society into plots involving modern genetic engineering, quantum physics, and archaeological discoveries. In these stories, the Nine are frequently depicted as a still-active organization, their ancient wisdom directly relevant to contemporary crises like a manufactured pandemic or the weaponization of artificial intelligence. This modern literary treatment accomplishes two crucial things. First, it acts as a narrative bridge, connecting the distant past with the pressing anxieties of the present, making an ancient legend feel urgently relevant. Second, it democratizes the mystery. In these page-turning thrillers, it is not a chosen successor who uncovers the truth, but an ordinary, if highly skilled, individual. A linguist, a former soldier, a historian who stumbles upon the conspiracy. This suggests that in our interconnected age, the society's secret may be becoming harder to contain, and that the responsibility for safeguarding humanity's future may be falling to a wider circle of people than ever before. Each of these adaptations, from comics to games to novels, does more than just retell an old story. It reinterprets the myth through the lens of its own time, ensuring the legend's continued evolution and relevance. The Tintin version reflects a mid-20th century optimism and faith in heroic adventure. Alan Moore's take mirrors late 20th century deconstructionism and moral ambiguity. The video game iterations speak to a 21st century desire for agency and interactivity in our storytelling, and the modern thriller novels channel our current technological anxieties and the fear that our scientific progress is outpacing our ethical development. With every new incarnation, another layer of meaning is added to the ever-growing legend. The Nine Unknown Men are no longer a static idea from a single historical tradition. They have become a dynamic cultural archetype, a narrative vessel into which each generation can pour its own hopes, fears, and questions about power, responsibility, and the hidden forces that shape our world. This constant reinvention is the ultimate key to their immortality, proving that the most powerful secrets are not those that remain hidden, but those that are continually rediscovered and reimagined. So we find ourselves at the final crossroads of this centuries-old mystery, staring into the heart of the ultimate question. Is there any truth to this captivating legend, or is it merely one of the most elaborate and enduring stories ever told? To find an answer, we must weigh two very different sets of scales. On one side, we have the cold, hard ledger of historical fact, and on the other, the more ethereal balance of philosophical possibility. Let's begin with the evidence that historians and skeptics would present, which is, to put it bluntly, devastatingly simple. There is no proof. After more than 2,000 years of alleged activity, not a single verifiable artifact has ever been found. There are no recovered pages from the 9 books, no hidden tombs of the original members, no meeting halls, no payroll records, and no personal letters or diaries that mention membership in this eternal council. For an organization said to be guiding the entire course of human civilization, its material footprint is a perfect and absolute zero. This is a silence that echoes across millennia, a void that seems to swallow the legend whole. Furthermore, the story's own origin is suspect. The Emperor Asoka left behind numerous detailed edicts carved into stone and pillars, proclaiming his conversion to Buddhism and his new principles of non-violence and public welfare. In all these public proclamations, there is not a single mention, not even a hint, of him founding a secret society of scientist guardians. For a ruler so eager to broadcast his ethical transformation, the creation of a hidden council to control human destiny would be the one project he would logically and absolutely keep silent about, which makes its historical verification fundamentally impossible. Adding to the skepticism is the very structure of the knowledge the Nine are said to guard. The idea of separating science into 9 distinct, modern-sounding categories like propaganda, biotechnology, and gravitation feels deeply anachronistic. The intellectual world of Asoka's time was not so neatly compartmentalized. Knowledge was far more holistic, intertwined with philosophy, spirituality, and metaphysics. This compartmentalization looks much more like a projection of our own modern understanding of scientific disciplines onto the ancient past, a classic sign of a legend being refined and reshaped by later generations to make it more relatable to contemporary audiences. Then we have the problem of the story's transmission. The legend as we know it today is not an unbroken chain stretching back to ancient India. It was introduced to the West by a colonial writer with an agenda, amplified by occultists seeking to validate their own beliefs, and then sensationalized by a master of pulp fiction. The journey from Louis Jacolliot's philosophical musings to Talbot Mundy's thrilling novel created a compelling but entirely fabricated narrative framework that has often been mistaken for historical fact. From a strict, evidence-based historical perspective, the case for the 9 unknown men is not just weak, it is non-existent. It is a house of cards built on anecdote, wishful thinking, and the human brain's powerful desire to see patterns and intention in the random chaos of history. Yet, to dismiss the legend entirely because it lacks physical evidence might be to miss its deeper, more profound point. What if we are looking for the wrong kind of proof? The philosophical argument for the society's potential existence asks us to consider a different kind of reality. Imagine for a moment that such a group was not just a medieval secret society, but an organization that had truly mastered the principles of secrecy itself, operating on a level of sophistication so far beyond our own that its very mode of existence is invisible to us. We are like ants on a forest floor, aware of the rain and the sunlight, but completely oblivious to the hiker who carefully steps over our anthill. Our tools for detection, archaeology, historical documentation, are designed to find things that were meant to be found, or at least things that were carelessly lost. They are not equipped to find an intelligence that is actively and perfectly concealing itself. If the 9 are real, their primary skill would not be science alone, but the art of remaining utterly undetectable. Their greatest achievement would be the 2,000-year silence that now serves as the primary evidence against them. This line of thinking leads us into the realm of metaphysics, where the argument shifts from, is there evidence? To, is such a thing possible? Consider the concept of a singularity, not a technological one, but an intellectual and organizational one. We accept that a master spy can live a double life for decades without their family or friends ever knowing. We accept that special forces units can operate in total deniability. Now, extrapolate that principle across 2,000 years and grant this not to a single individual, but to a self-perpetuating system designed for exactly one purpose: to remain hidden while influencing the broad currents of human progress. This would require a decentralization so absolute that no single member knows all the others, a succession process so flawless it has never once failed, and a communications network that leaves no trace in any medium we know how to monitor. It seems impossible to our linear cause and effect minds, but that does not mean it is impossible in absolute terms. It simply means that if they exist, they operate in a mode of secrecy that is, by definition, beyond our current capacity to comprehend or uncover. Their existence would be a paradox. The only way to prove they are real would be for them to reveal themselves, and doing so would violate the very foundation of their mission. Perhaps the most compelling argument for the society is not historical, but logical, rooted in the observable patterns of human history itself. We see a strange, recurring phenomenon where revolutionary ideas seem to emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world, as if they were ripe for discovery. Calculus was developed independently by Newton and Leibniz. The theory of evolution was articulated by both Darwin and Wallace. The structure of the DNA molecule was pieced together by competing teams working in parallel. The standard explanation for this is the theory of multiple discovery, which suggests that once a certain level of knowledge is reached in a civilization, certain ideas become inevitable. But what if this inevitability is not a passive process? What if it is the result of a gentle, guiding hand? From the society's alleged perspective, their goal would not be to invent these ideas for us, but to ensure that when we do discover them, we do so in a way that is distributed, competitive, and therefore less likely to be monopolized by a single, dangerous power. They wouldn't hand Newton the Principia Mathematica. They might simply ensure that the intellectual conditions in Europe were ripe for a mind like his to flourish, while another mind on another continent was nudged in the same direction to prevent a single cultural narrative from claiming sole ownership of truth. This would make their influence not a violation of free will, but a subtle cultivation of it, a nurturing of the global intellectual ecosystem to ensure robust and decentralized growth. Ultimately, the choice of whether to believe in the 9 unknown men may be less about evidence and more about worldview. It is a choice between two different ways of looking at human history. One view sees history as a complex, emergent phenomenon, a tapestry woven from countless individual actions, random events, and blind luck. It is messy, unpredictable, and often terrifying. The other view sees a story, a narrative with a purpose, guided by an unseen author who ensures that, despite our stumbles, we are moving toward a destination we cannot yet see. The legend of the 9 offers a powerful antidote to the existential vertigo of the first view. In a world grappling with pandemics, climate change, and the threat of nuclear war, the idea that a benevolent, hyper-intelligent council is managing the most dangerous variables is an incredibly seductive comfort. It allows us to believe that someone has a plan, that the dizzying complexity of global civilization is not hurtling toward an inevitable abyss, but is instead being gently steered by a wisdom far greater than our own. Whether they exist in material reality may be the wrong question. Their true power and their enduring legacy lie in the fact that they exist as a vital psychological and philosophical reality, a modern myth that gives tangible form to our deepest hope, that humanity's story is not a tragedy, but an epic with guardians watching over its most perilous chapters. And so we reach the end of our journey through the whispers of time. From Emperor Asoka's blood-soaked epiphany on the fields of Kalinga to the silent, triangular crafts gliding through the night skies of modern France. We have traced the legend of the 9 unknown men across 2 millennia, exploring the 9 secret books that purportedly hold the keys to everything from the human mind to the cosmos itself. We have stood with brilliant, enigmatic figures like Pope Sylvester II and Nikola Tesla, wondering if their genius was entirely their own, and we have peered into the haunting story of Shivkar Talpade, whose forgotten flight hints at a technology lost to history. We have seen how this ancient Indian tradition was transformed by Western writers and occultists into a global mythos, a story so compelling that it has embedded itself in our comics, our novels, and our deepest curiosities. Through every twist and turn, one theme has remained constant: the terrifying, beautiful, and double-edged nature of ultimate knowledge, and the profound responsibility that must accompany its power. The evidence, when examined with a cold, historical eye, suggests this is a magnificent work of fiction, a tapestry woven from anecdote, philosophical desire, and masterful storytelling. There is no vault, no dusty tome, no tangible proof of the society's existence. And yet, the philosophical and psychological case for its possibility is strangely resilient. It speaks to a fundamental human longing for order in the chaos, for a wisdom that transcends our often short-sighted leadership, for a safety net as we stumble toward a future of our own creation. The legend endures not because it can be proven, but because it feels necessary. It is a narrative life raft in the stormy seas of existential risk, a story that allows us to believe that someone, somewhere, has a firmer hand on the tiller than our politicians and corporations seem to possess. So let us end not with a definitive answer, but with a final, open-ended question, one that turns the gaze away from the shadows of history and back onto ourselves. Whether the secret society of the Nine Unknown Men is a historical reality or the most captivating fiction we have ever told, what does our centuries-long, unwavering fascination with them reveal about us? What does this persistent dream of hidden guardians say about our relationship with the terrifying power of our own knowledge, and our deepest, most heartfelt hopes for the future we are building, one discovery at a time? We would love to hear what you think. Do you believe it is all a compelling story, or is there a part of you that wonders if, just maybe, we are being watched over? Share your own theories and reflections in the comments.